What invention is so good that it actually can't be improved upon? I've heard the pin setter machine in bowling alleys has never had a redesign. It was perfect already. As of modern day, new high-end pin setters have actually got no perceivable way to change their core design. I'm training to be a pin setter mechanic, and like 3/4 of my close family also knows at least intermediate pin setter stuff. P-trap, a simple, elegant way to prevent odor from coming into your house via the sink, toilet, and other amenities. A lot of Asia still doesn't use this, and trust me, it makes a huge difference. I lived in China for 18 years. At one stage, I was in a 30-story apartment with no P-trap. The bathroom was actually located in the center of the apartment and had louvre doors. The pipes were straight drops from the top of the building to the bottom. There were 4 apartments on each floor, 1 in each corner. We each had our own set of pipes we shared with all the people in that position on every floor. Whenever somebody in my corner of the building flushed the toilet, on any floor above me, I was on the 4th, the louvre doors would blow open just a little bit with toilet air. Even with the lid on, it happened. This greatly contributed to the spread of SARS. You know, a mirror is about as good as it gets for its usage. The XLR cable. Until they can beam something directly into your head, we kind of hit a dead end for perceived sound. The simplicity of what a cable can do by allowing both AC and DC power to flow through so you can power and draw signal from a microphone. Plus, the fact that it's so simple to remove the noise you get from outside interference makes it even more genius. Phantom power. Paperclip. Last major patent was in the 1880s. On a similar note, the binder clip. Those little guys are the source of many life hacks. Okay, I'll add mine. If you take 2 binder clips and clamp them together, you can make a holder for your phone to watch videos. Those bones they use for tanning leather. People have tried using all sorts of different materials, but bone always works best, apparently. Yeah, if I remember it correctly from my college classes, those weren't created by humans. Like, what? It was a tool created by Homo erectus, I believe, but it does predate anatomically modern humans. Huh, I wonder if we can say Homo erectus on YouTube in the same breath as a fact about bones. I guess we'll see. YOLO! I reckon we'll be fine, to be honest. We're talking about cavemen, you prudish algorithm. Cast iron skillet. Established 1707. The brick. It's been made of mud, then mud with straw, and then mud with clay, then finally with clay alone. That is as far as progress has taken the brick in the, I guess, 8,000 years since it was invented, and it's still in use today. Someone, lost in the obscurity of ancient history, realized you couldn't build really strong stone structures with irregularly shaped small natural stones, and hewing huge lumps of stone into regular shapes was just ridiculously hard work. That person also observed that mud that fell into a fire was left hardened when the fire died down. So they figured that if you shaped mud into regular shapes, big enough to carry one in each hand, you would have all of the advantages of small irregular stones and large geometrically carved stones, but with none of the drawbacks of either. This thought must have taken a second to dawn on the inventor. The practical work to prove the concept must have taken a weekend at most, perhaps a week or 2 to get the shape just right, and here we are, thousands of years later, and the damn thing has barely changed at all. Pizza. You can change it up, you can ruin it, and you can fold it in half like a crazy calzone-munching madman, but you can't beat perfection. The calzones betrayed me? I'd say nail clippers. Rich and poor people all use the same thing to clip their nails. Rich people pay poor people to clip their nails for them. Yeah, and those poor servants use the same nail clipper the other poor people use. Zipper. It's the best way to merge in traffic. Yeah, it's meant to be a zipper, you idiots. Learn to drive. Rubber bands. They work. When I was a kid, rubber bands would last for years. Now most of them fail within a year or so. The premium rubber caused wars and mass atrocities in poorer nations. I'm fine with cheap rubber that doesn't cause those side effects. Most professional classical music instruments are already in their final stage, like piano and violin. Taking the other tack, most orchestral scores don't feature a saxophone because it wasn't developed until the 1840s, which is extremely recent on the musical timeline. The pocket. The spoon is a pretty incredible invention. It can often sub as a fork or a knife, and it has a great name. Those special self-stabilizing spoons to help people with hand tremors feed themselves are pretty cool. Over-engineered for most people, but I'm happy they exist. You can also improve on it by making it comically large. The basic sewing needle. It really hasn't changed in thousands of years. There's no need for change. I'd argue that the sewing machines are just advanced sewing needles, though. I still can't figure out how they work. I've seen animations and videos of the mechanics, but my brain refuses to process it, and it looks so simple. Almost too simple. The soda can. The physics behind it have been perfected. The toilet S-bend. We'd still be throwing our Hershey soldiers out of the window without it. Invented in 1775 and still used today. It was actually improved on. Used to be an actual S-bend, but those would evaporate or kinda get slurped out by another drain further down, so they made the U-bend. It has a vent pipe running up so that another toilet or sink or whatever on the same pipe couldn't siphon off the trap. You know, the place where the water sits, the low point of the toilet. After the trap gets below a certain level, sewer gas, hydrogen sulfide if I recall correctly, gets in and makes the room smell terrible. It's been about 4 years since my plumbing class, but it was pretty memorable. That mini trident you use to scratch your back? Man, that's the best invention of the human race. I don't know, man, the lightsaber thing under my mom's bed was really nice when I used it as a back massager. A knife. It can do anything. Can it make soup? Windshield wipers. My engineering professor always lectured us on how perfect the design is, and how any new changes made are strictly aesthetic and don't actually work any better. Plates. You can get the ones that don't smash. Zooples. It's too good. Holy crap, I haven't thought about those things in years. You just awoke some long-forgotten memories. The steam turbine. It's such a useful way to convert heat into electricity that it wouldn't be surprising to see one strapped to a fusion reactor, if one ever gets built. Does cheese count as an invention? Yep, it's a final step of a specialized process. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say a doorway. It's a portal, plain and simple. An ancient invention that allows us to pass through walls. Sounds pretty awesome when you put it that way. The Schrader valve, used to inflate your bicycle tires, car tires, tractor tires and stuff, was patented in 1893. It's still used in virtually every tire on the planet. And you know its name. I mean, true connoisseurs believe the Presta valve literally improved upon the design. Is this even a question? The Juicero, obviously. Thanks to its Wi-Fi dependency, you can watch naughty movies while your drink is juicing. I still can't believe a bunch of techie idiots paid hundreds of dollars for a machine that squeezes juice out of a bag. In fairness, the Juicero was the most exquisitely designed bag-squeezing machine ever conceived or built by human minds, with all kinds of custom machined hardware and proprietary DRM software on top of that. It was like building a space shuttle to fly into orbit, circle the Earth, and then land a mile away from where you started just to get across town. It's less of a how question than a why question. I don't know, sliced bread is pretty hard to improve on, plus it's made life easier for pretty much anyone who enjoys bread. I present to you double-cooked sliced bread. It took the narrator far too many seconds to realize that you were talking about toast. I literally typed the words double-cooked into the search bar before my brain clicked. Please let me know if you're as dumb as me, listeners. I need the solidarity. Well, I was going to say a shovel, but it looks like people have already said spoons. What is a spoon but a very small shovel? What is a shovel but a very large spoon? Are you asking if there's an invention that does its job so well that nothing else can do the same job better? Like how a light bulb can give off more light than a candle, but so far we haven't produced anything that emits light better than LEDs. Or are you asking if there's an invention that perfectly solves a specific problem? Like if you want to keep dry while walking in the rain, your best choice is an umbrella. Things that come to mind are AM and FM radio, it's about as efficient as it's going to get, the pencil and pencil sharpener, I don't really see how you can improve them, the match and lighter, the umbrella, the hammer, the bucket, the TV remote, the fishing pole, the hinge, the spring. I'm not trying to say that these things are the be-all and end-all of their intended purposes. Say you want to catch fish, obviously with one fishing pole you can only catch one fish at a time, while with the fishing net you can catch many fish at once. So obviously you'd want a net more than a pole. The fishing pole's design isn't likely to improve. What more can be done for it? Look at unnecessary inventions like fireworks. There's nothing to improve about them because they serve no purpose to begin with. They solve no real problems, there's nothing beneficial about them. The guitar. A pizza cutter. Have you tried both the rolling kind and the scissor kind? Birkenstocks. Safety pins. Conventional can opener. I remember when my mum came home with this new can opener she found, supposedly revolutionary because it cut the side of the can under the lip rather than the inside of it, thus eliminating any sharp and dangerous edges. Which sounds great until you go to open a can of tuna and realize you can no longer use the lid to press down on the tuna to drain the water. Arguably one of the best things that a conventional can opener allows you to do. I immediately switched back to the 20-year-old metal opener, and I think that was the last time anyone used the newfangled one. According to Andalites from Animorphs, paper books. The diamond bicycle frame. There have been many experiments, changes, material advances, and refinements, but for a non-suspension frame, the classic diamond, used in the 1880s, is still the most popular and efficient use of material. Standard kitchen knife, either chef style or santoku style. There are devices that can do similar things, but pound for pound, the versatility of these knives are unmatched. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I know this will sound super niche, but Rubik's Cubes. They've gotten to a point where the speed is so perfect that it doesn't really need improving. The safety razor, miles ahead of any plastic multi-bladed monstrosity in terms of durability, cost efficiency, environmental impact, and functionality. We really nailed the right piston configuration with the inline-6 engine. I think we'll have switched to purely electric vehicles long before we invent a better configuration than the i6. As an Asian, I'd say rice cooker. The nail. The tiny piece of metal has been shaped that way for thousands of years, and it still hasn't failed us. The original mousetrap. Soup. It's easy and requires no utensils. Spoon optional. It can be eaten by anyone at any age. Now here we go. The metric system. Acoustic guitars. You can always change the design and whatnot, but the main concept will always stay the same. I heard from my brother that the basic military high-explosive grenade hasn't been improved on in like 20 to 30 years. Its power is enough to destroy literally everything in a 30-meter radius, and it's full of ball bearings. He said something about how if it was made any more deadly, it would kill the user as they can't possibly throw a hand grenade any further. Its only use is to dig a ditch, sit in it, and throw it over your head. If you threw it on flat ground, you and everyone else in a 30-meter radius would no longer exist. Fire cooking. We've been trying to improve it for almost 2 million years. Induction. God, I hate electric stoves. Years ago, I was sitting at my computer in a cold room, trying to play a game while keeping warm with a blanket. It was problematic, and I started thinking about how I should sew a blanket with sleeves so I could still have warm arms and keep my blanket in place. After a moment, I realized I'd just invented the jacket and almost felt like an idiot. A few years later, someone made millions off the Snuggie. Garlic bread. You. Aw, thanks bro. You too. Crocodiles are any apex predator that lived through the KT extinction. Physically unchanged for 100 million years because it's the perfect killing machine. A half-ton of cold-blooded fury, the bite force of 20,000 newtons, and stomach acid so strong it can dissolve bones and hooves. Brooms haven't changed, no matter how hard Swiffer tries. Vrooms came close, but brooms are still the best way to sound like a car. Straw to plastic, wood to metal to plastic, it's still a broom. Cordless vacuums serve the same purpose and do a better job. Scissors are the perfect tool for cutting and shaping material that will likely never be improved upon. Hoodies. Cold? Hoodie. Underdressed? Hoodie. No bra? Hoodie. Hot? Hoodie. Rainy? Hoodie. Dead inside? Get a hoodie. The Hitachi Magic Wand. Duct tape. I have to disagree. It can be improved upon. It can be rebranded as duct tape. Have you ever used Gorilla Tape? It's far superior. I'll never buy duct tape again. People are really having trouble understanding the question on this one and are just posting things they like. My favorite one was the guy saying the shovel is perfect and hasn't been improved upon. Meanwhile, somewhere out there, this very second, there's a sad and forgotten excavator that's doing in a minute what a shovel could only manage in a day. A really good grilled cheese sandwich. Some good bread with good butter, some good cheeses with some heat and attention. God damn it, it's frickin' great. Common wood screw or nut and bolt as fasteners. Fender Telecaster. It's perfect and simple. You can shred metal or play jazz on one. I don't have an answer, but I just wanted to say this is a great question. Well done, question asker. A hair comb. Even the ones found in ancient Egypt and elsewhere are basically the same design. The game. What else can you do to it? It's nearly global, it's one of a few non-consensual things in the world that doesn't hurt you, and it's fun to play by yourself or with 3 trillion or more. God damn it! The trebuchet, obviously. It is, as has often been pointed out amongst great scholars on the webinet, the superior siege weapon. No, I don't care that gunpowder made all catapults superfluous, go away. The 3.5mm audio jack. Dongles are evil. I'll never forgive those phone companies for what they did to me. Okay, hear me out. How about a 3.6mm audio jack? A broom 100 years ago? Bunch of hay and grass on a stick. Brooms today? Bunch of plastic hay on a stick. Log by Blammo. What rolls down the stairs alone or in pairs and over your neighbor's dog? What's great for a snack and fits on your back? It's a log. It's log. It's log. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's good, alright? Madden NFL. They perfected it 15 years ago, so they haven't made a single change since. No, they perfected it 15 years ago and then removed a lot of the best stuff, added microtransactions, and let the single-player modes they couldn't monetize stagnate. It'd be better if they did just keep it the same every year since 2005. The wheel, invented around 3500 BC and still rolling on today. Math. A new mathematical formula just means that we finally learned how to use this thing that way. It's had the potential the whole time. The pencil. I guess you could use better materials, but the base principle is the same and perfect if you ask me. Ticonderoga. How about a mechanical pencil? Or how about a space pen? My C++ Hello World program. A minor change and it won't work any longer. The Jersey barrier. It seems that this shape of concrete barrier is just about as good as you can get for stopping vehicles, with some exceptions for variations with slightly better performance. The aglet. That's the little piece of metal or plastic at the end of shoelaces. It's a simple yet very helpful invention that's perfectly fine just the way it is. You're kidding me, right? You're telling me you ain't never had one of them janky plastic aglets fail and fall off, leaving the shoelace or hoodie strap to just die a slow death? Well, have you got a better idea for a replacement? I didn't think so. Duct tape. It's often called one of the best inventions, making wallets out of it in 5th grade. The trombone. Tickling your pickle. Anything past hand and groin is doing the deed with an inanimate object. You say that like it's a bad thing. The Shure SM58. Garlic bread grilled cheese. A waiter's corkscrew. The small, sturdy, double-hinged kind that can fit in your pocket. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. The standard variety has an ergonomic, solid feel, and the little flip blade makes a great box cutter. It's like an impromptu multi-tool. It takes about 30 seconds to learn how swiftly and elegantly uncork a bottle, even while standing blindfolded. They blow all of the other corkscrews out of the water, and it always makes me wonder why people keep trying to reinvent the wheel. The clunky rabbit ear ones or battery-operated monstrosities are just so unnecessary. Zippo lighters. The company was founded in 1932, and the original design has only had super minor changes over the years. And if your Zippo ever needs a repair, they charge you a penny, which they also give you. I've had mine for 25 years or so. The compass. Micro SD. Stop with the size, guys, you did it. I mean, sure, add more storage, but you found the size profile bedrock. No smaller, no thinner. Victory. We can improve it. We have the technology. Smaller, thinner, invisible, the $6 million misplaced memory card. Toilet paper. Bidets are the future, I think you'll find. The doorknob. It wasn't invented until 1878, though. Lever handles are more accessible. Vice grip. The A10 Warthog. How are you going to improve a giant death dispenser with a plane tacked onto it? You could add Bluetooth? I don't know, because it's probably classified, but I bet that plane's computers need a UI update. I've wondered how we managed to get traffic markings as effective as they are on the first try. I can't even remember ever seeing anything different from what we have today. Hint? It took a lot of tries. We didn't remotely get it right on the first one. Driving a car 100 or more years ago was some hot bullcrap with how few rules and signs we had back then, and how much of a lunatic everyone who drove was. A lot of people had to die in vehicular accidents to get the rules and signs we have now. Ice cream. It comes in so many different flavors, and it's such a mood booster. The AC motor. The Teslas driving around now have basically the same motor that Nikola Tesla invented, but with modern manufacturing methods. The bread bag plastic clip. The flat one that has a slot and teeth. I met the guy that invented it, and he had one made of gold in his pocket to show me. Interesting turn for the "so what do you do?" question. Nail clippers. Toasters, man. Haven't really changed much since they were invented. Heating element heats bread. Boom. Toast. Aluminium drink can. I feel it will be with us for a very long time. If not the material, the shape and opening mechanism. I think you'll find that everything can be improved by adding Wi-Fi to it. You should start some kind of Kickstarter for that. Walking upright. 3 million years and still going strong. My dad has said for years hangers need to be reinvented, but they seem pretty solid to me. The hammer. The absolute tool of perfection for rapid transfer of force within a very short amount of time. There is nothing to improve upon. The zipper. How about aspirin? That's pretty good. Ticonderoga Tri-Write pencils. The table. It would be hard to improve a table. Deck of cards. A card that has barely changed in over 100 years. The Skoda Yeti. It's so good that they stopped producing it. Umbrellas? I don't see what you could do to improve upon it aside from changing the size, and that doesn't really count. What are the deepest, darkest secrets you've overheard in your Uber? I could go on for days with these, but this one takes the cake. It's not a secret, just one of many insane experiences. So, I picked up a guy in a suit at around 6 p.m. on Tuesday near Venice, California. He told me to take him downtown, and as per usual, I asked if he had a preferred route. And he said, "No, whatever's quickest." We get going, and the usual banter begins. "So, how long have you been driving for Uber?" I said, "A year or so. It's a great job." He says, "Oh, cool. Where do you stay at?" And I answer, "In the valley." And he says, "Oh, nice, nice. So, how long have you been driving for Uber?" I paused and kind of half smiled, thinking he's messing with me. He wasn't. So I answered verbatim, 1 year or so, it's a great job. He goes, "Oh, cool. Where do you stay at?" This repeated 3 more times before I finally answered it differently, saying, "I just started. It's not for me." And him replying, "Oh, cool. Where do you stay at?" I answered one last time the original way, but then finally silence. By this point, I was on the 10 highway, stuck in rush hour traffic. I look in my rear view and he's rubbing his head and hair profusely, like someone going through withdrawals. He took his suit jacket off and looked severely uncomfortable. I dialed 911 on my phone just in case stuff went down. Then out of nowhere, he yells in a deeper voice than earlier, "Frick!" And I said, "Sir, is everything alright?" And he goes, "Where are we?" I said, on the 10 headed downtown. Is that still okay?" And he goes, "Yes." At this point, by the graces of the universe, we ended up moving pretty quickly through the traffic. Then, right before we exit off the 10, 2 miles or so from his apartment, he yelled again, "Where are we?" I said, "Sir, we're almost to your house. Is that still okay?" And he goes, "Yes, that's fine." Once before we arrive, I pulled up to drop him off and he gathered his stuff, opened the door and looks back in at me before walking away, and in the most genuine, kind way says, "Have a great night. Watch out for crazy people." I think of all the suggestions, substances do seem to be the most reasonable. Dementia is possible as well, but the way he was sweating and getting increasingly uncomfortable in the back seat makes me think that it was something artificial kicking in. Honestly, one of the strangest, creepiest events ever. Subsequently, I brought a taser, and luckily so, as this was just the beginning of several crazy incidents. So I'm glad I don't drive Uber anymore. You see, when the author here writes that he was lucky that he did in fact buy said weapon, that does make you wonder if he was lucky because he had to use it shortly afterwards. What ratings do you use on a customer that you had to stun? Or for that matter, a driver that stuns you? I have two. The first was two girls talking about how they did the deed with the same guy. Both of them agreed his member was too big and he was hurting them by lasting too long. They both concluded that he was gay. The second was two middle-aged couples trying to agree to a menage a four. Had a driver tell me he was changing his name to Nilrim because it was Merlin spelled backwards and he was a wizard. Once I had an extremely drunk middle-aged couple fight for an entire 30-minute ride. They attempted to bring me into their fight many times. I just pretended like I was deaf and didn't answer when they tried to rope me into it. I had an Iraqi driver tell me he was an engineer in Iraq before the first Gulf War, and that he'd developed a superior means of gilding furniture, chandeliers and stuff, which you can imagine was hot in pre-war Husseinville. Well, O'Day wanted to go into business with him, but, and this is a direct quote, "First, O'Day wants to be your partner in business, then he wants to be partner in your wife." Words to live by. I think I was the culprit in my story. I live in New York City and I had to call the self-deletion hotline while coming home in an Uber from work because it was the only place where I could more or less be alone. I was so thankful to the driver for being patient while I was crying and saying really effed up things. It was so obvious it was the last thing he wanted to deal with that night. My friend Ubers in my hometown, picked up some really nice girls on the first Friday. They're talking about their plans for the next autumn. He begins to think he recognizes one of them, turns out to be my younger sister, and he tells me about it. And that's how I found out my little sister was moving to Spain. Driving Uber one night, it was pretty tame up until I picked up two guys who wanted to go to an exotic dance club 40 miles away. As they requested an Uber Select fare, I was happy to drive that far, like $80 to $100. It took them 15 minutes to get ready and into the car, and they seemed cool, so I wasn't worried. As soon as we got on the freeway, the guy in the passenger seat started asking about Uber driving and things got dark. After a few minutes, he started saying stuff like, "What would you do if someone just grabbed the steering wheel and ran the car into the median? And have you ever thought about what would happen if someone in the backseat tried to strangle you while you were driving?" I got a little freaked out and tried to lighten the mood by asking what they were celebrating, but the one guy just kept at it. I was happy to get to the club and get the heck out of the car. The bonus was the bouncer at the club gave me a whopping $40 for dropping them off there. I never drove Uber again. F that. Once I had two girls and a guy declare their love for each other as friends and saying they should hang out more often when they got in the car. By the time I dropped them off, they hated each other and never wanted to speak again. My tongue was bleeding by the end of the ride from trying not to laugh my butt off. I cracked a few smiles, and I wonder if they ever noticed. They were fighting over the new football coach at the local uni. Former Uber driver here. I picked up a sweet girl from a bar on a Wednesday night, absolutely hammered at about 10 p.m. She got into my car, apologized for being so drunk, and politely asked if we could just drive around a little while with the windows down. I was prepping for a cleaning fee, trying to drive and pull a paper bag for her to hurl into out of the glove box, but no, she just did that airplane thing with one hand out the backseat window. She asked me if I ever thought about dying, to which I replied, "Yeah, I guess so." That's when she told me she had cancer. It was in her brain and it was too far gone to consider chemo. I remember my heart just pounding. She told me she was dying and she was going to be okay. Tonight she was celebrating with her work friends who threw her a going-away party. She told them she was taking a position abroad. I just didn't tell them that abroad was heaven. Jesus fricking Christ. I turned off my app and cried all the way home. Picked up a girl mid-Saturday. She was a bit upset and a little teary and opened up to me. Turned out a business she'd started was failing and she was in debt and had turned to exotic dancing on the side to cover the bills. She said the pay was good, but she kept getting really sick from all the booze she felt obliged to drink. Part of her job was making guys spend money at the bar. She hated it and felt trapped and kept asking me what I'd do in her situation. I'm a guy, so kind of hard for me to answer. Tried to give her the best advice I could think of, like getting the tax office to withhold tax for a while, but couldn't help really. Only thing I could do was end the trip early. The other one was a couple of off-duty cops who didn't want their friends to know they were using Uber, because it was still a legal grey area here in 2016. Took this 19-year-old kid and what I assumed was his girlfriend back to her house on Pride weekend in San Francisco. They made out the whole ride. When I dropped them off, only she got out. He said, "Take me to Castro and 18th. I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I only make out with girls when I'm rolling. Never a dull moment in San Francisco." So, this driver I know told me that he picked up his last fare for the day and it didn't have a final destination. The guy gets in the car, off his mind on white snow, yelling on the phone. The guy said, "Drive to Vegas, here," and tosses him $500. This is on top of the Uber fare, which apparently was surge pricing. So, the guy drives him to Vegas, from LA, which takes about 4 hours. The whole time, the guy was talking and yelling on the phone at his mum. They get to Vegas, and he drops the guy off at some mansion where the mum was outside waiting to yell at him. Apparently, the guy forgot about giving him the cash because he tossed another few $100 at him, got out the car, and split. I picked up a guy from a gay bar, and he was noticeably coming on to me while I drove. He then confessed that he was one of the founders of a very popular gaming company and offered me $2,000 to come up to his room. He also refused to leave my car unless I kissed his hand first. Fun times. Man, Gabe Newell is out of control these days. I kid, although I'm very curious as to which of the big names in gaming he was, if he was any of them, since all the ones I can think of are ostensibly straight and married men. Never overheard a juicy secret, but plenty of interesting people. One time I had a group of 3 guys, probably around my age, their mid-20s. They seemed nervous, avoided eye contact, and were pretty much silent from the moment they hopped in. I tried confirming the destination, asked how their night was going, but only got muffled mumbling in return. As always, I worked out the situation in my head in a rather calm, rational manner. Something like, are these guys trying to rob me? Jack my car? Did they just kill someone? Am I an accessory to murder? Do they have knowledge of the impending apocalypse? But as my paranoia routine wound down, I slowly started to realize what was going on. Between the beads of sweat, occasional jaw clenching, and finally random giggle outbursts, these kids were just frickin' tripping. Once it hit me, I called them out immediately and told them I was cool. They looked so relieved. I started blasting music, some Humphrey McGee, I do believe, so they just started geeking out by that point. It was a fun ride. At the end of the ride, the guy that sat up the front tossed me a bag of hallucinogenic fungi. Good times. It wasn't so much weird as it was random, but my first night driving for Uber, I picked up a dude at 2:30 a.m. that was finishing a pub crawl. The guy was dressed in a purple dinosaur onesie and was hammered. He got in and started telling me his entire life story and how he came out to his parents and moved across the country the next day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Picked up a girl who had to go to work across town. Her boyfriend and her were arguing in the parking lot as I was approaching. The girl gets in my car, and she's worried she's not going to get to work on time, and she'd be fired if she was late. Get to about a block away, and my phone rings. I answered and tried to get it off my Bluetooth stereo to no avail. The person on the other line was her boyfriend, and he said he wanted to apologize about his girlfriend and that I shouldn't listen to her because she was a crazy witch. She heard all of it and didn't say a thing. Very awkward. Finally get her to work, and she asks me to stay in the parking lot as she goes in and quits her job. She gets back a few minutes later and on the way home tells me that her boyfriend once broke her arm in an argument and that he was going to be really mad at her and she was worried about going back home, but to take her there anyway. I ended up dropping her off and calling non-emergency, but I have no clue if anything ever happened there. I had someone get in my car, told me he's in his late 20s and that he's doing the deed with the girl who just recently turned 18. I awkwardly told him, okay, good for you, and he proceeded to tell me that it's not, that his life sucks and everything he does to make himself happy doesn't work. He told me that he watches lots of vids of people self-deleting and he wishes he had the courage to go through with it himself. He told me he's going to go to San Francisco and spend every last penny he has on vacation and to just jump off the Golden Gate Bridge when he's done. I didn't really know what to say to that. When I dropped him off, I told him I hope things start looking up, and he just said, they won't, they never do, and left. He also asked weird questions like, if I hit you, would you kick my butt? When I said I'd rather no one hit anyone, he said, dude, you'd whoop my butt, I'm a frickin' piece of crap. I hope he got help. My friend Uber driver George is doing Uber pool one night in Austin where you pick up multiple people en route to the destination. First girl, number 1, gets in the car alone and sits in the back seat of the passenger side. Then a couple, a guy and a girl, come in and there's not enough room for everyone in the back, so girl number 2 sits behind the driver and guy sits up front. The 2 girls in the back start chatting and seem to be getting along well. Girl 1 asks what they're doing tonight and girl 2 says, oh, me and my boyfriend Josh are going out to celebrate. Josh works at XX and just got a promotion. At this point, George notices Josh is crouching down in his seat and looking guilty. Then girl 1 says, that's funny, my boyfriend's also named Josh and works at XX. I wonder if they know each other. Then girl 2 starts tapping her boyfriend on the shoulder, bugging him to turn around to meet girl 1. At some point, Josh can't avoid the interaction anymore and is forced to turn around. He does so with a look of utter horror on his face as it slowly dawns on both girls that they're dating the same Josh. Anyway, they both start screaming and they kick him out of the Uber. Not sure what happened after that, but you can bet that Josh never took Uber pool again. This was more of a dark situation than a dark secret. Driving around waiting for pings, and I get one at a popular bar. I pull up and a young woman flags me down, gives me her name, asks for mine, and I'm her ride. Easy enough. There's a guy with her, they're both quite drunk. She says goodnight to him and gets in the rear passenger side door. Homeboy is not having it. Decides he's coming with us. Starts trying to convince her, despite her saying she has work early and wants to get to sleep. But he's not taking no for an answer. It's getting a bit weird and he's getting more and more pushy and aggressive about it, to the point that she's clearly uncomfortable. I step out of the car and say over the top, "Hey man, if she says you're not getting in the car, you're not getting in the car." He looks over at me with hate in his eyes. I'm a bit tense, not knowing this kid's deal. He slams the door, walks away, talking crap as he does. And yeah, talking crap as you walk away. What a punk, right? Get back in the car. The girl seems a little more sober after the experience and is shaken up over it. I take her back home, make sure she gets in safe. Not as scary or weird as it could have been, but the guy gave off a bad vibe, and I'm glad he took the hint and effed off. Two guys discussing how much fun they had at one of their bachelor parties. The fun consisted of, "This is the most white snow I've ever done," and "I can't believe I hired a working girl right before I got married." I was the passenger, this is my story. I got picked up at around 2:15 a.m. at the bars. An older man, white Volvo station wagon. It's a pretty long drive, so I figure I'll talk to this guy. I ask him what credentials you have to be an Uber driver. He said, "Background check and all that." Probably for the best, huh? Wouldn't want any nutballs driving people around. And then almost as if he didn't hear what I just said, he offered, "Yep, I'm an unspeakable act offender though. Don't worry though, you're not my type." Uh-huh? You know what I really like though? Philip Seymour Hoffman. He was a true legend. And he proceeded to talk about Philip Seymour Hoffman for 15 minutes straight. All the time with me just going, yep, he said as we got close to my house. "Oh, I know that hill. I like to park there and watch girls walk home from school." As we pass my house, I say, "Yeah, just a few more blocks that way." Reported him to Uber. They said they'd look into it, and I never heard about it again. I think there's a significant chance he was messing with me, but I reported him anyway to err on the side of safety. Yeah, that's not a funny joke to make, and seriously, he couldn't have blamed you for reporting him if he were a rational person. But yeah, my money is on him being far from rational. Scary stuff. One time I was driving a guy for a bit of a long trip. It was going to take around 25 to 30 minutes. He wasn't hammered, but definitely a bit drunk. It was late and he must have been feeling a bit down, so he confided in me and asked me for some advice. He told me he's madly in love with his fiancé's best friend and he couldn't back out now. He's been with this girl for 4 years and engaged for 1. He was ready to be married in a few months. It was pretty sad to hear, because it wasn't just your average story. It was filled with a lot of subtle emotional and mental anguish. The guy went through about 5 years of ups and downs with this girl, and found an innocent friend and comfort in the best friend. After a few years, he developed feelings, and it was just downhill from there. I felt bad for the guy because he seemed like he was truly in love with his fiancée too, although he had strong feelings for this friend. He knew that going through with the marriage meant a lifetime of being around the friend and suppressing feelings, but also breaking it off meant that he lost the girl of his dreams. Seemed like a genuinely nice guy, and I hope he's doing okay. Picked up 2 guys. They were talking about how they were going to keep hiding their relationship from their wives and children. Pretty messed up stuff. My mum does rides in San Diego, which is a city that loves its Navy, and is where future Navy SEALs go to BUDS, or Basic Underwater Demolition Training. My mum was telling me one time she gave a ride to a young man who was about 20 years old. He'd been fighting to become a SEAL his whole life and ended up falling asleep on the last day or 2 of BUDS and getting dropped for the season. He was just as crushed though because he'd made it through everything before and now he'd have to wait before being able to enroll again and would be starting from scratch. Anyway, during the ride he started to open up to my mum about his other passion, which was medicine, and she suggested that he chase that dream instead because he came off as a very caring and devoted person. At the end of the ride, he asked her to step out of the car so he could give her a hug, and a huge thanks for lending an ear and giving her an honest opinion about the situation. He also left her his phone number so that he could give her a call and let her know what he'd decided to do. A few days later, he gave her that call and said he'd returned back home to Texas and would start taking courses to pursue a career in medicine. I once drove some well-dressed Russians in between bars on the west side of Chicago. I used to work for a Russian-owned cab company, and I do understand a little Russian. I heard two of them talking back and forth about something one of them was very anxious about. The phrases that jumped out at me were, "This is death, this is serious, blood is on me, and I'm not a bad man." The other guy was just mainly telling him to relax a lot and telling him, "There are no fools here," or something along those lines. Upon dropping them off, like an idiot, I temporarily blanked that I'd just heard parts of a seemingly harrowing conversation, and I said, "Dobroy noki," which means good night. One of them heard me, the older guy telling his colleague to relax, and he just stared at me. Then he came around to my window while reaching into his coat pocket, which scared me crapless. He then pulled out $100 and said in English, "My friend, do we understand?" I just took it, nodded my head in the affirmative, and drove off. I didn't take any rides for the rest of that night. Not so much secrets as they are things that people don't normally say or do in front of strangers. I picked up a divorced father whose buddy paid for his Lyft ride to the bar. Why? Because he was supposed to see his kid that evening for an overnight, but the wife had the authority to dictate the terms to him of seeing his own child no matter what, and she wasn't feeling it. Granted, I definitely got one side of the story, but it was frickin' terrible to see a man who desperately wanted to spend time with his kid be completely blocked from it over bullcrap. California had given dads so little rights, from how this guy described it, so that even though he had a stable job, good house, and was willing to pay for a hotel so he and his son would stay in the town the mum lived in, it was a no-go. That was a tough one because I was so powerless to help. The other one was where I picked up a girl to take her straight from work to the hospital to see her dad. Her mum had called her work to make her end her shift early because it was serious. Her dad had cancer. I dropped her off and was like, God, I hate this job because I'll never know how her night ended. I was wrong. Next night, I'm taking people home from bars and two guy friends took her out to get wasted because her dad had died. They were being drunken idiots, so when I took them to get pizza, she came outside and we talked about it a little. That was probably the one ride where I felt like I had a positive impact on someone's life beyond getting them home safely. Then there was the time I was taking two couples home. Dropped off couple number 1, and the husband of couple 2 was in the front seat and made a comment I didn't hear. Apparently, he insulted the wife of couple number 1, his wife's best friend. The wife in couple number 2 didn't like that, so she hit him. Not like a playful slap, she struck her husband. Straight on domestic attack. I laid down the law. We're not going anywhere if this is how it's going to be. The guy was drunk on tequila, the chick was pretty drunk too, so the ride home was him asking me, "How do you feel?" and me saying, "It's not about how I feel, you two need to discuss this tomorrow when you're sober." It's weird, man. You get a passing glimpse into people's lives and love it and hate it at the same time. What's the weirdest, most disturbing thing you've seen in a customer's house? I was a carrier for the post office. When you first start, you only have one route 1 day a week. Every other day you cover for someone who calls in sick or is on vacation or something like that. So one day I covered for a different carrier who was sick. I got to one house and they have like 4 packages. On the front door there was a sign that said, "Please don't knock or ring, just open door and leave the packages behind the door." So I'm like, okay, this is weird, but whatever. It must happen a lot because the sign was old and dusty. So I opened the door, went in, and the house is normal. I bend down to put the packages down neatly. As I rise back up, there's this old dude who had to be like 60 or 70, just standing there in really tight jeans, a really tight tank top, with a clearly dyed jet black mustache, drinking beer out of a can with a straw. I naturally got scared for a second, so I told him, "Sorry, you scared me. I didn't see you there." And he just says, "That's because I wasn't here." So I just say, "Well, I'm sorry," and start to leave, and he says, "Hold up. Where is the name of the person I was replacing?" And I said, "Oh, she's sick, so I'll be covering for her today and possibly tomorrow." And his words verbatim were, "Nice, maybe she should stay sick a while. I'll make sure to wear something cute tomorrow." I fake laugh and get the hell out of there. Disturbing? Not at all. Weird? A bit. I was a medical equipment delivery guy for a couple of years. Went into a dementia patient's house and had to instruct his caretaker on how to set up a large e-tank of O2. As I was kneeling down, my phone went off with my really low-key notification tone, which was a singular beep. Well, the pet bird nearby seemed to have taken a shine to that noise and mimicked it perfectly in tone and volume. The caretaker and I looked at one another, with her saying, "I've been here for 6 years and he's never done that before." From then on, every time I delivered and knelt down to re-educate the caretaker, which SOP demands that I do, That bird would instinctively ping me until I let my phone notification sound go off, after which the bird would celebrate by bobbing its head up and down and turning in a circle. I was a firefighter another time in my life. Had a middle-of-the-night call to a mobile home for an elderly lady once. We walked in and it's dark, but as my eyes start to adjust, I think, oh, that's weird wallpaper. I keep looking around. It's on the ceiling too. Weird inconsistent patterns and rectangle shapes. My eyes adjust some more while we're talking to her. What the frick? Are those puzzles? She had hundreds of puzzles that she had glued when completed and then glued them to every surface of her mobile home. Walls, ceiling, living room, bedroom. Every square inch covered. Weird. But you do you, especially in your own home. What a puzzling situation. But I'm glad you were able to piece together a respectful attitude to her decoration style. That's it. I could think of 2 puzzle-related puns, and the second one was a real stretch. But that's after leading my brain on a 2-hour jig. Saw what I did there? Ugh, I hate myself. I'm an electrician, and I was troubleshooting a bad outlet in the bathroom of a former NFL player. I was taking all the outlets apart, following them to see if I could trace out the home runs, when he comes in and starts talking football. We're in the middle of talking when he just walks over to the toilet and starts going number 2. I couldn't see him, but there was this little pony wall between us. He didn't even stop telling his story. It was crazy. I walked out because of the smell. He came out a little later, and it was like nothing had ever happened. That's probably normal for the guy. I doubt training camps and whatnot are known for having stellar bathrooms. I remember a story about a player being gifted a game ball by the coach because he managed to take a crap while on the bench in the middle of the game without someone noticing. I used to deliver oxygen to people's homes. I saw plenty of weird things, lots of hoarders, but this one took the cake. He didn't want to let us into his house, but I had to do a home safety assessment before I could set up the equipment. He was anxious about letting me in because his house was a mess. He kept telling me about his messy house. I came to find out it wasn't just messy, it was filled with 200 chickens. He was proud of his show chickens and wouldn't let them live in a barn or coop. That's probably why he needed oxygen. The smell was unbearable. Other than that, he was a super nice guy. I was a paramedic in Oakland, and once I was in a home where a child had been bitten by a rat in her crib. As we were standing there talking to the mother about her options, a rat walked up to one of the firefighters and bit his boot. The firefighter stomped the rat to death, and the rat was taken to the health department for testing. That was a strange situation. Long ago, I did estimates for fire and water damage repairs for a restoration company. The couple had a small fire in their bedroom. When I entered the home, it was seemingly normal, smelled a bit like smoke, which made sense because there was a fire. They took me to the bedroom, and it was the mattress that had endured the majority of the fire, along with some of the wall above the head of the bed and smoke damage to the ceiling. Next to each side of the bed were 10-gallon buckets filled to the brim with cigarette butts, and hundreds of spilled-over butts all over the floor. I was just in awe of how they could live like this in their bedroom, especially since the rest of their home seemed tidy and normal. Also completely beyond me why they wouldn't clean that crap up right after the fire, if for no other reason than insurance adjusters being able to blame them rightly and possibly not pay out. So, how did the fire start? I asked. I was required to ask. No idea, the husband replied. I once helped renovate an old building that was a house but converted to a business, and it was super run down when my employer bought it. We did a ton of work, including removing subflooring and ceilings. We found a hidden cellar in the back suite. It was once the kitchen or mudroom, I guess. The thing was filled with trash and random odds and ends. There were GI water ration cans dated 1956. In the middle, we kept finding spoons in the ceiling as we were taking it down. It was weird, but then we realized it was where a junkie kept ditching their spoons. Fire alarm inspector here, working in a cheap long-term hotel, and I knocked on a door where a large man, dressed in essentially a purple bikini, opened the door half asleep. I entered to test the smoke detector and tried to keep my eyes off the bed, but I knew I'd seen something. I tried not to look, but I did, and there was a big old purple eggplant-shaped adult toy next to the TV remote. The detector then decides to not alarm in a timely fashion, so I'm just staring at the wall hoping it will alarm, so I get out of the room. My boyfriend is a locksmith. During the 2008 recession, Las Vegas had hundreds of thousands of homes getting repoed or abandoned. The company he worked for would have him go and change the locks to keep people out, and usually this happened in the middle of the night to limit the possibilities of running into ex-owners of the properties. I sometimes tagged along, mostly to explore some of the ridiculously big houses that people had just left, but I also helped some of the time. This one house looked totally normal from the outside. You couldn't tell any difference from any of the other cookie-cutter planned development homes. But inside every room, there were these time-out dolls. If you've never seen them, they're a doll that stands against the wall with its hands up to its face, even more creepy usually since they have no face, but they look like a kid hiding their face or pouting after being put in time-out. When I say they were in every room, I mean every single room. And not just one, but dozens lining the walls. Not laying down, but standing up against every wall of the house. The house's electricity had been shut off, so all we had was flashlights. Walking into each room, it didn't get less creepy seeing doll after doll. He's already afraid of dolls, and this made it so much worse. Altogether, we counted 63, but there might have been more. I was installing alarm systems, and one day I went out on a service call. I stepped into a literal cesspool, and thank God for my plastic booties to protect my shoes from walking on their disgusting carpet. I was shown to the alarm panel, and when I pulled the panel off the wall to see why it wasn't powering on, an army of roaches started scurrying out of the wall. Turns out the panel died because several roaches had electrocuted themselves on the circuit board. I used to do flooring, and there was this one time we had to get up the subflooring due to water damage. Underneath it there was a black garbage bag. When I opened said bag, it had a bunch of women's clothes in it. Didn't think anything about it until we dumped them out and found bloody ripped undies and torn dresses. We told the owner we had forgotten some stuff at work and wouldn't be back until tomorrow. We called the police and never went back. The house was soon up for sale a month or so later. Food bank delivery to homebound elders. I always fill 2 banana boxes of all types of food and deliver it to his house. One time, after delivering to him for 3 years, I had to come inside because he'd hurt his foot. He had never thrown out a single box. They lined every wall and entrance. He built a castle around his bed and a series of paths through his house. It was like those pillow forts you could make as a kid, but with boxes. I asked him if he wanted help getting rid of them, and he said no, that it was fun and helped with his dimension. He was super fun. I mean, I guess cardboard boxes are a lot safer than some of the other things that people can hoard up big piles of to inevitably fall on them. As long as they're not alone and they have daily visits for food, I think that guy was all good. I tutor privately, so sometimes I meet clients at their homes. One lady had a huge shrine to Bob Burdella, which is really confusing because usually women attracted to serial killers gravitate towards the attractive ones. I did apartment maintenance for a while. We started quarterly inspections, and the first day we opened the door, the smell that came out to us was indescribable. The guy who was with me was ex-military, and he said that we were about to find a body. As an employee of the maintenance community, it tends not to be a matter of if you ever find a body, but when. He told me that he'd go in alone if I was uncomfortable with it, but I went in too. We didn't find a body, but we found a mountain of trash that took up the entire dining area. And honestly, just trash everywhere that accounted for a lot of the smell. Most of it was food packaging. We also found a dog, a very sweet golden retriever that was starved for attention. It was obviously just being left to go number 1 and 2 all through the unit. It probably hadn't been outside in weeks based off the smell and general condition of the unit. We went outside, locked up, and called the property manager for her to come by. While we were waiting, the tenant came home. The look on his face when he saw us was terrifying. The manager talked to him and they set a plan about cleanup and gave a time frame for him to get the unit back in order. The other maintenance guy stayed with him for a while that evening. When we left the unit, he was sure that the guy was going to self-delete that night. Turned out the renter had recently gone through a very rough divorce where his children had been removed from him with very little warning and he was spiraling. I left the company before I learned how it all ended. I hope he's doing better. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I delivered pizza for about 2 years. I had to deliver to a local motel pretty frequently. One day I went to deliver, and a large lady, I'm talking 6 foot, 220 pounds, was decked out in leather attire. She answered the door, ready to get down to business, and then immediately closed the door and threw a robe on. She apologized profusely, and then tipped me $10 for the situation. Sure, I could have gone in, but when these situations come up at 16, you never play them like you think you would. Also, she took one look at me and probably thought I was way too young to be her client. Damn baby face, I look like I'm 20 and I'll be 30 soon. I delivered pizza, but for older customers, I'd always go to their homes to bring it inside for those who were severely handicapped or just didn't have the strength to bring their food inside. One time I delivered to this lady who was covered in cat hair, head to toe, and the inside of her house was rancid. I mean, I couldn't go in there without holding my breath every time. One time I went there and she had in her kitchen on a table a paper plate with what looked like teeth. And I mean a lot of teeth. Different colors and shapes, just horrifically repulsive. I don't know whose teeth they were. From what I could tell, she had all, if not most sorts of the things. I haven't heard any stories about her since then, so I'm guessing she's moved or something else. I'll never forget that smell, though. Ugh. I'm a journeyman house painter by trade, and I've been self-employed in the profession for over 20 years now. About 10 years ago, I was going to paint an older woman's home. She was probably 75. I was painting the kitchen and the attached small family dining area. All of the furniture was moved, carpets were out, pictures were off the walls, the place was ready to paint. I always start by removing the faceplates from outlets and switches. First one, just 2 screws, I pulled the plate off and found the outlet full of termites. Packed. Dead, thankfully, but this was an indication something bigger was happening here. I went and I asked the woman about it, and once she saw it, she called her representative at ABC Pest Co. to come over immediately. After explaining the situation, he was quickly on his way. I went to standby mode. I wasn't going to paint anything if the house was coming down. Luckily, the client had purchased the paint and she was going to pay me by the hour. The project I was going to be painting was going to take me about 5 hours total, for $125. Well, the pest control guy looked all around the house, pulled a few more outlet covers off, with the same results. They were all packed with dead insects. He changed into full coveralls and climbed under the house. He was only under there for a few minutes, maybe 3. Out he comes and declares the house a total loss. The floorboards, he said, were hanging on by a thread. The walls were all soft and about to be pushed out. The entire house could collapse at any moment. I packed my tools and said my goodbyes. I told her not to worry about paying for my time. I'd been there for about an hour, and she had much bigger problems to deal with. Honestly, I felt so bad for her. She'd probably been in that house for about 20 years and now it was condemned. I didn't want to ask anything else of her. I do know other people have demanded payment for their time. Not me. She lost her home. I learned a lesson. Do an annual inspection of your entire home, or you could lose it. My uncle's a handyman and he went in to do some work for a family, and the toilet was just a pile of number 2. Not like someone didn't flush, rather nobody did, and the bowl was just crammed full of hardened stool, which had clearly been in an accumulating scenario. I painted a girl's room one time while she laid in bed and played on her phone and took naps. I knocked and expected her to leave, but she just laid back down. It was very strange. I used to work pest control, went into student accommodation to deal with insects. I can't remember what type, it was carpet moths or bedbugs maybe. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. This one room is fairly clean, but we have to spray all fabrics with the chemical in question to prevent any eggs from having a safe space to gestate. So we open up suitcases, wardrobes, that sort of thing. One suitcase is full of used tampons that she was saving for frick knows what, actually, and I don't want to know. Nasty stuff, that. I didn't mention it, it was just the job, and I tried to avoid eye contact at the end. I'm a face painter who does children's birthday parties. I've never had any super sketchy experiences, just a few run-down homes, but the kids always have fun. I went to one house, kinda messy and smelly, but no big deal. I started setting up my supplies and then I heard a weird peep sound above me. I looked up to see a guinea pig running through a clear plastic tube attached to the ceiling. Then I take a good look around the house and notice the whole place is covered with a network of guinea pig tubes. The mum noticed me looking around and nonchalantly told me they had like 10 guinea pigs. I think a lot of us as kids would have been very envious of that setup, but now as a jaded adult I can only think of the cleanup, which is more than Michael Scott ever thought of in his 40s when he wanted to set up a tube city. So maybe it's not purely a maturity thing. I did a carpet cleaning job with my uncle. He couldn't lug around the carpet cleaning equipment because he'd gotten hurt the night before, but he'd already promised this job would get done. No biggie, I went along to help. He'd asked the owners to move heavy stuff around so he could clean. The dining room table was covered with packaging labels. I looked behind the table. There were adult movies stacked on the floor. Tons of them. Going into the master bedroom, I found a bottle of lubricant, adult fun toys, and more movie boxes. My uncle shakes his head. I told them we were going to be everywhere. You think they're coming on to us? The biggest kicker came when we went to go into the adult son's bedroom. A glass pipe, more movie boxes, and a rack of clothes by the bed. My uncle just shakes his head, goes to grab the rack, and like a mummy from its coffin rises a girl from underneath the blankets on the bed. Half undressed, they casually just walk away into the hallway. You know, hearing all of these make me feel so much less paranoid about the cleanliness of my house when professionals come over. I work as a maintenance guy in a community of more than 500 units. Let me tell you, if you've been working here for 7 years, you've seen it all, from someone's house being completely infested with roaches to a person whose house was floor-to-ceiling hoarded with old newspapers. The one house I'll never ever forget belonged to a lady who had a lot of mental health issues. I went over to her unit to check for damages after Hurricane Florence. When I went in, I was overcome with the smell of pure sewage. I asked her if her toilet was acting up. She said she didn't know. I was like, okay, I'll check for you. When I stepped into the bathroom, there was number 2 piled above the rim of the toilet. I asked her how long her toilet had been non-functioning. She told me she didn't know. She doesn't flush the toilet because that's how the devil gets into her house. I work in lead abatement for a city and county-run program. It's mostly low-income people that receive the free or heavily subsidized work. The people receiving the work are out of their homes for a week or 2 while we work. So many people will just leave so much food out. This one lady was going to be out of her house for 2.5 weeks while we did a bunch of stuff. This witch left a full raw turkey just laying out on the counter. Of course, we toss it by day 4 because it's starting to stink and attract a lot of flies and bugs. A week later, she came by and wanted to get it to cook it, and became incredibly hostile when we told her we'd had to throw it. The city ended up buying her a new turkey that evening. Another family left about 10 pounds of raw chicken on their stove. Like, not in a pan or a bag, but laid out directly on the stovetop. We threw that crap out as well. One of the more recent ones was a house that was occupied by a group of Nepali immigrants. There was about 3 full families, about 15 to 20 people living in one house. Apart from the human waste in the basement, and the dead chickens they left around, they had a little chicken coop in the basement as well. Their house was infested with roaches. Not like seeing one a day, but opening a cupboard and dozens falling out. It was so disgusting. Then there was this other guy, a piece of crap who kept his dog locked in the basement for days at a time. There were hundreds of piles of dog doo and literal puddles of urine on the basement floor. The sick part is that the weird F left the dog there knowing that they'd be out of the house for 2 weeks. The neighbor ended up taking the dog and gave it to their daughter who lived elsewhere. At last I heard the dog was doing much better. But to clean the basement before we painted it, we literally had to spray Febreze in our masks to not throw up. A more sad one was this extremely old lady, like 90 years old. She needed someone to help her daily, as even just getting up was a struggle. But her crappy kids refused to ever help. There was a hole in her living room ceiling going into the bathroom. Like you could reach your arm through and wave to the people below. It was right next to the toilet and had just rotted out because whoever installed the toilet didn't use any type of ring seal. Every time you flushed, crappy number 1 water would just splash downstairs. They had a red Solo cup taped to the leasing pipe to catch the water. And now for the ethically disturbing stuff. This program was for people with children under 8, because lead has been linked to numerous developmental disorders like autism, and due to limited funding, in order to get the work done, the people had to prove they had a child in the house at least 4 days a week. Holy F. So many people messed with this, claiming they watched their niece or nephew 4 days a week and potentially taking away the ability for someone else to have the work done that actually had kids at risk. This one slumlord, who was renting to the dog guy mentioned before, really effed with the system to get 8 houses done for free or very close to free. The total amount for the work done was above 200 grand. People even went as far as taking lead paint chips from a different house and putting them in or around their windows to cheese the tests. I went to install a tube-style skylight in a bathroom. The owners had the gayest bathroom I've ever seen. It was impressive. Think Roman decor, marble, and just everything involved a man's eggplant. Light switch, toilet paper holder, towel rack, shower curtain hooks, all of it was just shaped like male anatomy. Students, have you ever lost it at a teacher? We got this admin in my school who we've nicknamed the Pickinator. In my sophomore year, she was patrolling around the school, fricking Dolores Umbridge style. She loves ruining kids' days and she busts kids for the most minor of things. This really annoying kid that no one likes came up and snatched my backpack and ran. So I ran after him and ripped it out of his hands. Pickinator comes outside and immediately says, "You two, stop wrestling around and come with me." She escorted us to the office because apparently we were wrestling and fighting. I tried to tell her that I was just getting my stuff back and she was not having it. So I just said, well, I got my crap back, no reason to stick around now, and went to my next class, which was starting shortly. I got called down later anyway, but my admin pretty much told me she had overreacted and to just forget it happened. Pickinator hates me now. When I was 8, I had a sudden and intense urge to go pee minutes before the school bell was set to ring for home time. I asked the teacher if I could use the bathroom as I was desperate to pee, and she said absolutely not, and that I wasn't about to trick her and sneak off home early. I started begging her frantically, but she ignored me and started addressing the class about what to bring for tomorrow. I felt my body give in halfway through her speech and just stood there behind my desk. As the bell rang, all of the other children ran out of the classroom instantly. The teacher approached me and said sarcastically, "I thought you were busting to go, huh?" I told her I already had and kept my head down. I think she was just as embarrassed, explaining to my mum why she hadn't let me use the bathroom later. In Heidelberg, on my year abroad, my friend and I took a class that we thought would be interesting. It wasn't. The teacher was a complete cow who hated her non-German students, and as we were the only 2 that semester, go figure, she was okay-ish with me after learning I was part German, but awful to my friend. We missed 2 classes overall, had to return to our own universities for a bit. This was agreed beforehand, so we missed 2 of her classes. Every other time we went to that class was together, so we missed the same amount of class. However, that woman told my friend she had automatically failed her class as she had missed 3, but I was fine as I'd only missed 2. We both decided to never go to her class again or sit her exam. Oddly enough, that exam never showed up on our year abroad credits, and we both passed with high marks. A racist German? I didn't think that was possible. Okay, look folks, I'm going to level with you here. I wanted to make a pun about not seeing that coming in a slightly more blatant form, but I'm not sure whether that would have gotten the video taken down, so you get me being sad and indirect about it instead. My 2nd grade teacher was Sister Bridget. Bridget did not like me at all. One day I was feeling ill and I asked to use the restroom. She told me I was lying. As she tried to tell me why I was a liar, I chucked up all over her shoes. 8th grade science class. God, I hated her. For the sake of this, let's just say her name was Mrs. B. Early on in the year, Mrs. B had given us a science fair project due in January. We had several class periods over the course of those months as well to work on it. My project was creating an unbeatable tic-tac-toe program. It did work properly, but that's besides the point right now. Because it would take significantly longer to have 20 people, the amount of tests we had to do, each play 3 rounds with the thing, I asked her if we could do fewer and she agreed, allowing me to only do 7 people, which I got done shortly before the Christmas break. Only about 1.5 school weeks until the project was due. I made sure to thank her for letting me do fewer, as I would have never gotten it done in time otherwise. She turned to me with this confused look and said something to the effect of, "I never said that. You have to do 20 trials like everyone else." I was so insanely furious. I even got a witness who'd overheard her give me a lower number come in as evidence. Both me and my witness ended up in detention. I did end up getting the project done, but barely, and it was rushed as heck. I still occasionally think of it and want to punch a hole in the wall. I hadn't been doing well in calculus all year, but I was trying my best and just struggling. My teacher was one of the cool ones, the kind who acted laid back and cracked jokes and all that. I think this guy just thought I wasn't trying, and he was as frustrated with me as I was with myself. One day in class, he made a sort of passive-aggressive joke at my expense. Something about, "If you would just try harder." He didn't even say it in front of other students, just to me. But I was so over him thinking I wasn't trying that I got up and walked straight out into the school counselor's office. I would have been sent there anyway for walking out in class, so I decided to expedite the process. She was really kind and talked me down from being so upset. Anyway, that was on a Friday, so I didn't see my calculus teacher again until Monday. I was hoping we could just pretend it didn't happen, but no such luck. He pulled me into the hallway to talk, and truly, genuinely apologized. He offered to adjust his office hours, which didn't work for me, to give me extra help. He ended up helping me pass the class. Barely, but I still passed. I wouldn't have graduated without it. In retrospect, just talking to him more openly from the get-go probably would have been the more mature thing to do, but I was an awkward, self-doubting teenager who didn't know how to ask for help. In the end, the experience helped me improve that skill and advocate for myself. I still hate calculus, though. I once had some kind of stomach pain, the worst pain I've ever felt in my whole life, and I was in science class. I started groaning in agony in the first frickin' row, and my buddy next to me said I needed to leave and go to the hospital. I wanted to, but my teacher, the C word, ignored me. and the tears that had now started streaming down my face. A minute later, I just stood up, walked to the door, and as soon as she tried to talk crap, I told her to pipe the F down and walked out with a raised middle finger. Then I proceeded to chuck up in a trash can outside. Good times. My IT teacher wanted to inspect my work. Spreadsheets or a Word document or something. Anyway, she accidentally deleted the file. I was upset and tried to point out she had just deleted my work. She started to shout at me, telling me I should have saved more frequently. I shouted right on back, telling her that that wasn't the issue. She outright deleted the file. It got pretty heated. My parents were called, we were outright yelling at each other for a good couple of minutes, to the point where we were both in tears. I was about 14 at the time. She should have known better. It was a long time ago and I was pretty stressed, so I can't remember exactly how, but after several attempts, I wasn't able to restore it. Looking back with what I know now, there are things I could have done to restore it, even going so far as to give myself admin rights and having a poke around. But I was 14 at the time, being taught IT by a French teacher. A few years later, my sister had her when she went to that school, and that same teacher berated my sister, calling her names and stuff. What a B-word. I had a bout of stomach flu which was so intense that it damaged my intestines, and as a result my body couldn't process certain foods for a while. This caused me severe pain. I mainly had cramps, and they were so bad I couldn't do anything useful except curl up and wait for them to be over. It took me more than a month to figure out a very limited amount of safe stuff to eat, which I ended up slowly expanding on over time. I did miss a few weeks of school when it first started though. Directly after my math teacher's class, she insisted I come up to her and explain why I'd missed so many of her classes. I had a note from my GP ready, but she dismissed it. She told me she could tell that I wasn't sick, but that I was just lazy and lying to everyone, and that she was severely disappointed in me. I literally just walked away, which is the closest I've ever got to having a temper tantrum in class. In retrospect, I wish I'd told her what I was really thinking, being that I was very disappointed in her. When I was a senior in high school, I had an AP English teacher that would grade people based on how much she liked them, essentially. I had long hair and stretched earlobes, and she despised me, even though I was an excellent student in all aspects. She claimed I didn't turn in assignments on time to justify my grades, so I spoke with my guidance counselor and she investigated for me. Turns out she'd sorted completed assignments into piles of good and bad and would arbitrarily grade the papers based on who she felt sucked up to her the most that day. I presented a book report on the Odyssey, which was by far the longest and most detailed presentation of the whole class, and she gave me a D. I told her, F you, this is the end of your career. And I walked out because I'd sent an identical copy to the guidance counselor. She presented it to the school board, eventually got her fired, and the best part was that she was also a driver's ed instructor and lost her job doing that as well. Apparently I wasn't the first to speak up about her, but I was the one that put the nail in the coffin, and it felt great. Ah yes, a long time ago in the 3rd grade we were having a math lesson and our teacher's assistant was helping our teacher out. I wasn't great at math at that young age, and I'd ask her for help, and then she'd ignore me and move on to a different student. I finally got her attention and asked her if she could please help me. She finally said yes, and then immediately walked away to someone else. So I got angry and slammed my fists down on the desk. The whole room went silent, and I said, I need help on my math, can I please have some help? The principal came down and talked to me and asked why I did that, because I got reported for being disruptive. She was actually really nice, and I never got sent to the principal's office before, and I told her what had happened, and she gave a death glare to the teacher's assistant. Which hopefully implies that there was actually some sort of disciplinary action and not just a stern look as a punishment, because educators who pull crap like that probably should be talked to. Hopefully she turned her act around. A friend of mine wanted to go to a certain university that was out of state and somewhat tough to get into. The counselor told him not to waste his time as he'd never get in. That made him real angry, so he went to the principal, who told him to trust the counselor as that was her job. He applied anyways, got accepted, and taped 2 copies to the counselor and principal's door. He couldn't afford to go anyway, but he was trying to prove a point. I once flipped out on my German teacher. I'm German, by the way. She obviously didn't like me, and her marks were biased as F. This one time she gave me an F on a poetry interpretation. Grading that is ridiculous, as you can just interpret it as whatever, and the mark depends on the teacher's mood. I always got an A for grammar because the witch has to give me credit where my work is quantifiably good. After handing the papers back out to the students, she did some debriefing about the whole thing, comparing what everyone wrote. She told the whole class how good my thoughts on the poem and some of the passages that I wrote were, and wanted me to read out loud what I wrote. I just said, "You gave me an F," stood up and left. C-word. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was in high school, we had the small, angry teacher that played rugby, or at least tried to, who was always belittling students to feel better about himself. One day we had phys ed and our teacher couldn't come, so the little and always moody teacher that played rugby came in to replace her. The little teacher was trying to show off his skills at rugby and making our class play some game where we had to tackle whoever had the ball. We didn't tackle hard enough, so the little guy joined in to tackle some students and show off his grandness. He was having fun being unstoppable and yelling at us if that was the best we got. I was kinda mad, so I just went running at full speed at him. Little teacher got tackled and hit the ground so hard. That was something our class laughed about all year. My 8th grade math teacher. She was the absolute worst and ruined any appreciation I had for mathematics forever. She'd purposely skip chapters and mark correct answers wrong if you wrote numbers a certain way. For example, you never put that little dash at the top of your number 7s or your answer was wrong. Also, pop quizzes. She had this rule where a pop quiz could cover any material out of the book, even if it was something we hadn't gone over yet. And it's not like we could take the book home to study. It was one of those classes where the textbook had to be left in the classroom. I just quit doing any work for her after that. It royally teed her off. When I was in high school, a girl absolutely lost it at my math teacher. The way the class generally went was we'd go in and we'd have the day's assignment written on the board. Then he'd spend the first 20 minutes of class teaching new concepts and going over problems. Then he'd give us about 30 minutes to work on our assignments and sit at his desk and answer questions. Overall, I really liked his style, but some did not. This one girl, for example, clearly didn't. About 3/4 of the way through the year, she snapped. The class was no different than any other. He explained the new stuff, did some examples, and then said, "Anyone who needs individual help, just line up at my desk and I'll be happy to help." She frickin' lost it. "What do you mean? That's it? I don't want to wait in line for 20 minutes. Help me now. This is frickin' bullcrap. F you." She was getting angrier and angrier. And to my teacher's credit, the angrier she got, the calmer and quieter my teacher got. And the calmer and quieter he was, the more furious she'd get. He said, "Now I understand you're upset, how about we go to the hallway and talk about this?" No, fricking help me with this crap here and now. Now there's no need for that kind of language, we can discuss this civilly. I'm happy to help you any way I can. F you! F this! I hate this fricking school! Look, I'm sorry you're so frustrated, what can I do? She was now screaming as loudly as she possibly could. Get F'd! F this, F that, F everything! Which devolved into incoherent screaming and cursing after a while. This is when the principal walked in and took the girl out of class. The teacher left for a moment to talk to the principal while we could hear this girl screaming all the way to the office, just every expletive in the book, all directed at the teacher. When it was all over, the teacher calmly walked back in, stood at the front and said, "Well, anyone else have a problem with me? I'm happy to discuss it if we can be civil." And no one said a word. Okay then, anyone who needs help, come see me. Class went on like normal after that. In retrospect, the teacher handled that crap like a frickin' pro in every possible way. Never saw that girl in class or in school again. So something had to have been going on to set her off like that, but I've never seen a student go off like that before or since, and I've worked as a teacher and sub for nearly a decade. Something had to have been going on with that girl, but I have no backstory for her. I don't know if she was struggling with grades or with that class, or if that teacher had said or did something to set her off that I don't know about. I just know what I saw in class. I'm certain something was going on with her to set her off, either at home or at school. I just think that math class was her last straw for whatever reason. I had a teacher at our private college that enjoyed calling everyone stupid and that we were only studying there because our parents showed how much they earned. There was a lot of scholarship students, myself included, but I guess who cares about that? I can't be quiet when I hear these sorts of things, so we discussed almost every class. She failed most of the class on the first course, we fought with the dean and she let us do another test with another teacher. And guess what? Everyone passed. On the second course with this one jerk teacher though, she failed us again, but this time the dean said we were being dramatic. The teacher decided that there would not be a test, only a group presentation. She settled the groups. I got stuck with 2 lazy guys who did nothing. I did the entire paper and the presentation. Both of them got a 9, which is an A, and I got a 7, which is a C-. It was the last time I did a paperwork with the names of the people who did nothing, no matter who they were. I needed a C to pass and failed because of 1 point. I tried to talk to the dean, but she didn't listen to me. She said I had to do the course again. I could do it with another teacher, but I chose that lady. I was the worst student she ever had. I sat in the first row, always made a fool of her, once I made her cry. The next year she wasn't a teacher there anymore. She made me lose my scholarship because of that grade, so I don't regret it. I'd do it again with an extra bit of cruelty. I still don't know why she started it, and it wasn't my class only. I really don't understand why she was a teacher if she hated her students that much, to the point where it became personal. Hey, come on, she didn't necessarily just hate her students. Maybe she hated all kids. And I've got to tell you, I'm with you if you instinctively hate institutions built around privilege and financial exclusivity. But the ankle-biters aren't to blame for that. Don't take it out on them. Educate them to not behave like spoiled rich brats. When I was in 8th grade, my science teacher decided the day before the last test of the year to give us an extra 16 pages of new material to learn by ourselves and appear in the test. Needless to say, everyone lost their crap and started complaining. I wrote her an angry letter. I was later forced either to apologize or they'd tell my parents. I apologized because I might have been a little inappropriate. By the end of the year, she was fired after her first year in the school. She also thought it was a good idea to bring her dogs to part of the lessons in the science lab when there were 2 kids who were allergic to dogs. I flipped out on a logic professor who apparently lost my assignments records, then said, "You didn't do them. I'm looking at your grades and they're zeros. That's why you have a D." I said, "Look, you idiot. I've got papers you've graded right here. They aren't even good, but they're not zeros." It was over the phone, but eventually I read through his comments on my papers while he was trying to argue with me. That's when he was like, "Okay, that doesn't sound made up. Scan your papers and email them to me." I went from a D to a B. After months of failing me because I couldn't do the problems his way, which multiple tutors told me was the hardest way of learning, and most of his 2 classes were failing, he accused me of cheating on the final exam. It's 2 weeks before I graduate high school. I've been failing because you and the administration have your heads up your butts, and you think I'm going to cheat on the final fricking exam? F you. Not me, but a girl flipped out on my economics professor because she kept cancelling classes without sending out emails. The girl only had that class on Fridays and drove an hour to get there. It sucked she got caught in traffic just to get a note next to the classroom saying, "Cancelled." I had a history teacher in high school who claimed the following: that America caused the Third Reich's atrocities against certain ethnic groups, that the Americans did the Pearl Harbor attack just to join the war, that JFK was planted by the Soviets, that September 11th was an inside job, I know, common meme, and the icing on the cake was when Chris Kyle was murdered. She says, "Nobody cares about dead soldiers," and pretended to spend an hour covering the life and career of Whitney Houston. I got up and just walked out of the room at that point. She left after 1 year there. Did a math test, and on the paper you could only mark your answer. You had to do the calculations on another paper. Long story short, my teacher lost my calculations paper and wouldn't admit it. He said I didn't hand it over and that I cheated and some other crap. So I went to the school supervisor and asked to take the test again, and she let me. My teacher asked to look while I did the test. He made another test, way harder. I frickin' aced it right there in front of him. He hated my guts for the rest of high school, and I couldn't care less. There was this high school English teacher, Mrs. Blades, who was ignoring me for a while. It's worth mentioning that she didn't really like me for some reason. I wasn't a bad or annoying kid. In fact, I was very non-confrontational and mostly kept to myself in and out of class, so I don't know what that was about. Anyway, I had my hand up because I had to use the bathroom, and she kept pacing about the room, answering every other kid's questions, but would glance at me and immediately look away. After about 5 minutes with my hand up and getting ignored, and about to crap my pants, I whistled as loud as I could. Interrupting anyone was completely out of character for me. Well, once upon a time, I'd chipped one of my front teeth, so I could whistle extremely loud because of it. My whistle was just that. It was the whistling equivalent of firing a weapon in a closed room. Absolutely deafening. The entire room got quiet and she snapped her head around so fast. As her name might suggest, Miss Blades was staring daggers into my face. Then one kid goes, "Ooh, he just called you a dog, ooh." Then she gained serious momentum from that one off and said, "Oh, I don't think so. You think I'm a dog? You think I'm a dog?" I got sent to the principal's office for disrespecting an ignorant teacher. I used the bathroom on the way there. I know a chap who once lost it in a lesson and threw a chair at the teacher. It was some years ago, like 15 or so, and the two are now good friends. Essentially, a discussion had turned into an argument, holding up the rest of the lesson, with the chap basically being awkward and pedantic, not letting anything go, getting unduly steamed up himself, and apparently not realizing that everyone was getting pretty tired. The teacher made some snide remark and the chap flipped, threw a chair and walked out. He waited outside though, cooling off, and afterward the teacher just went outside as well, said something to the effect of, "I think we both ought to apologize for what just happened," and so they did, and all was well. What's the most successful scam you've ever pulled? Back in the 80s, when Ireland started being on people's radar a bit more, because of U2 and Boomtown Rats maybe, there were very few Irish backpackers compared to now. I live in Australia. I'd score massive amounts of free booze in faux Irish pubs by pretending to be from the Emerald Isles. I was in the restroom of one, using the urinal, when a drunk guy came up next to me and asked if I was having a good day. For some reason, my subconscious decided to answer in an Irish accent. He was excited to meet an actual Irish person in a fake Irish pub where there were never any Irish, not even the staff, and he invited me back to his table to meet his friends. I didn't have to buy a round all night. I kind of forgot about it for a few months until I again found myself in another Bridie O'Reilly's, and a pretty girl pulled up next to me at the bar and said hello. One, "Hello, my darling," later, and I was drinking for free again. The act became perfected over time. You had to give the audience what they wanted. Many wanted a dangerous Irishman, maybe someone who had been peripherally involved in the Troubles. For those, I'd refuse to say if I was Protestant or Catholic and would be vague about my surname and employment. I'd also get evasive if asked about the scar above my eyebrow. For others, I'd admit to being Catholic and maybe tear up if asked about my hometown. One time a girl told me she'd been to Londonderry and I corrected her hotly, saying, "That's just frickin' Derry, thanks very much." I have no idea if that's actually a thing. So every few months I'd do this for years. After maybe a decade of it, I was sitting in a non-Irish pub with a new friend. Something about Ireland came up and I started to tell the story where he calls bullcrap on me. I turned to the booth behind me, interrupted the girls talking there and said, "Hello darlings, are you having a good time tonight?" After they replied in the positive, I introduced myself as Dylan and my friend as Murphy. Did I know if he could do an Irish accent? Nope. We quickly moved to their booth and had our drinks bought for us for the next few hours. On the way home, my still shell-shocked friend and I wandered past a house party with door security, and I stopped and asked the guy if it was a private party. He says it is, but nobody can resist my fake Irish charms, so after a few minutes we're inside. The highlights of the next few hours: free drinks, kissing the birthday girl, forgetting which one of us is supposed to be Dylan and which one is Murphy, the live musical act composing a song about everyone's two new Irish friends, and me stealing a slab of beer, that's 2 dozen, at the end of the night. That was the last time I did it because I wanted to go out on a high. The only downside was the first few drinks I was offered were always Guinness, which I frickin' hate. But after a couple, I'd say that I'd like to try some local beers. In short, faked being Irish, scored hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars of free drinks, and entertained young people. Good God. Well, I sincerely hope that your accent is better than mine was. But then again, if you're in Australia, your chance of running into an actual Irish person to call you out on it is pretty low. I think a lot of your success falls on this being the 80s, when we weren't all jetting around the world quite so much, and there were fewer internationals in any given setting. I made a fake OkCupid profile of this insanely hot girl I went to high school with just to get a feel for my competition as a guy. Ended up getting more than 100 messages per day. I added an Amazon wishlist to the profile and told all the visitors to get me something if they wanted my attention. I got a $280 Coach watch and a $400 purse in the mail a few days later. Gave them to my mum and sister for Christmas that year. Apparently, guys get pretty thirsty. Amazon doesn't give out your address when people buy you things off your wishlist, by the way. This was a few years ago, before catfishing and Tinder became really popular, so I don't think it'll work anymore. I deleted the profile right after I got the stuff, and I wasn't struggling for money. I was just bored and tired of girls ignoring me on dating sites. I never really felt bad about it because I liked lying to strangers and conning them out of free stuff. There was really no way for me to get caught. The fake profile didn't have my real name, address, or email anywhere on it. At the most, they could call Amazon and cancel the order, but the stuff that they knowingly ordered and sent to a stranger had already been delivered. I don't know if it's a scam since the people I sold to weren't getting ripped off, but I was definitely getting money that should have gone to other people. Back in the late 90s, the original PlayStation was the thing to have. All the best games were on it, and everyone in my high school was all about it. Too bad that for a high schooler, $49.99 was a lot of money. Fortunately, I'd been exposed to the internet recently, and being a super nerd, I was exposed to all sorts of early tech sites that talked about pirating stuff like it was discussing the weather. I learned about mod chips and how a simple chip with a couple of wires soldered to parts of the motherboard on a PlayStation would let me play copied games. Cool. Too bad I didn't know anyone with a CD burner. They'd just come out and computers were still $2,500 for what would now be considered a base model with equivalent specs. Inflated for the 20-year difference, of course. Getting into computing back then was a legit investment. I filed the info away, but I forgot to mention that my dad is a super nerd as well. A few weeks after I started learning about the black hat side of using computers, my dad came home with a shiny new 266 MHz gateway computer with all 4 GB of hard drive space and a gosh damn CD motherfrickin' burner. I immediately started hearing the ring of cash registers. Nobody in my entire high school knew what a mod chip was, much less a CD burner. I found a site on the internet that sold mod chips. It was in China, and it would take 3 weeks to get a shipment to me, but I could buy the chips for $7 each. I was working as a busboy at a crappy hotel restaurant at the time, and I only had a couple of $100 saved up. But I said, F it, and went all in. I brought $350 worth of chips, 50 of them, plus a couple of bucks for shipping. They came in a simple padded envelope with a bunch of chips with wires soldered to the chips themselves, but everything just tossed into a packet and mailed out. I'd never done any soldering, ever. My only experience was watching my dad solder a couple of things a few times. So I understood, soldering iron gets really hot, don't touch the metal with your fingers, and when you touch the wire with iron, it melts immediately and turns to liquid. Fortunately, the original PlayStations had no idea about mod chips. The soldering points had literally nothing around them for a 1/4 inch in all directions. So I could dump solder all over the board and still manage to not cross the connection between the point where I was putting the chip and any other points. Very, very good for someone that had no training and had to learn in a trial by fire. I tried on my personal PlayStation first. Installing the chip took about 3 hours because I had to stare at the picture for 20 minutes to make sure I was in the right spot every time. Putting the PlayStation back together took another hour because I was so nervous. It worked and my normal games could be played with no issues. I went to Blockbuster, rented a random PlayStation game, and made a copy of it with the burner on the new computer. The copied game worked perfectly. It was on. Every day I went to Blockbuster and rented another game. I was paranoid at the time and didn't want to rent more than a single game at a time, so I'd rent a game and copy it at home, then return it and get another. At the end, I had one of those 500 CD binders almost full of copied games. I went public in my school. I slid into the DMs of anyone who even mentioned games. I had a goddamn menu. $50, you bring me the PlayStation, with a serial that wasn't one of the redesigned ones that Sony released later to fight mod chips, with the soldering points super close to other points. I'd charge $300 for a PlayStation that I handpicked from FuncoLand's used stock, that had a chip installed already, and also 5 games. The deal there was that I had friends that worked at the store and would look for specific serial numbers for me. I'd buy every one and they made a profit. Regardless of whether I was installing a chip for you or giving you one of my FuncoLand models, I charged $5 per game for anything you wanted from my catalog. I made money no matter what. I paid $7 a chip, so $50 installed was pure profit, plus $5 per game. At the time, blank CDs were 75 cents to $1 each, so me clicking 2 buttons and coming back 20 minutes later was easy money. Handpicked systems made me boatloads of money. I talked to FuncoLand people in my neighborhood, you know you're old if you recognize this name before GameStop bought them, and told them that I'd buy every system that had a specific model number, SCPH-1001, which was the super easy system to mod. I gave them a commission on each system I bought. Wasn't too much, but $20 on $100 profit was worth it for them to do the work for me and call me when they got one. Then the games as well. After I had a game, I charged people $5 per game, $3 per extra disc. So Final Fantasy VII was $11, Metal Gear Solid was $11, and so on. I ran this business all through high school. My greatest accomplishment was giving my chemistry teacher a mod chip, installed, and Metal Gear Solid. He gave me his PlayStation, I put the chip in, and I gave him a copy of Metal Gear. I didn't charge him anything, I just thought he was cool as heck for a teacher at the time, and I wanted to hook him up. The guy was awesome even before he hooked me up. I loved him as a teacher. But when it came time for grades, I pulled an A when I should have probably pulled a C or a D. I made a few thousand. Probably less than $5K, I wasn't really counting. As a teenager, it was spent as soon as I got it anyway. It was amazing money at the time, and I was loving it. I feel like everyone's school had a kid that ran this in the 2000s. I just never got the scoop on how much they were earning or the work involved. As an amateur techie, this has been really interesting. Thanks for writing in. So, this was totally a friend of mine, not me at all. They, managed to get a cut of the local Devil's Lettuce dealer's monthly profits by selling him small vials of special fertilizer that he, my friend, could get from a special connection. Every month, he'd get about $200 just by giving him a sealed package with a few vials. One for each vase. It came with instructions. 3 drops per day. The dealer was ecstatic with how much faster the plants were growing, and how much better the product was, and had no problem giving him a part of the profits. It was just apple cider vinegar. This went on for half a year before the guy went in. He never knew the truth. In short, my friend buys 10 small vials from eBay every month for $2 or $3, fills them with apple vinegar, and gets around $195 of pure profit every month. I was in the 2nd grade. I had horrible eyesight, but I didn't know that. My desk was at the back of the class where I couldn't see jack on the board in the front, so I did badly in school. My teacher had a token system for giving out extra goodies to kids who finished assignments or did other good boy or good girl things. The tokens were these pink computer punch cards roughly cut into squares. But I never got tokens because I sucked at being a teacher's pet back then. So coming in from recess one day, I was walking in line like a good sheep to the classroom, and I noticed a stack of these pink punch cards on the counter in the back of the room where I sat. I sneakily grabbed a bunch, and as the teacher read Mr. Popper's Pequins to us, I sat at my desk with my crappy scissors cutting these pink cards into little squares. Now, my teacher didn't exactly track who she gave these tokens to, or how many she gave. I just went up to her a few times a week with my nice little counterfeit tokens and got candy and puzzle time and a bunch of other stuff. It was nice and I never got caught. I've since gotten LASIK surgery, so no need to follow a life of crime over my poor eyesight anymore. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I may or may not have had my high school diploma, but I definitely have a college degree. I've been going with the line of, well, I needed a high school diploma to get into the military, so I've got to have one. My school's admittance officer has been searching for proof of my high school diploma for about 3 years now. We were 18, drove to a gas station, grabbed a 12-pack and brought it to the counter. It was maybe $8 or $10. When the cashier inevitably asked for ID, I tossed $20 on the counter, grabbed the beer, and ran to the still idling car my friend was driving. It was quite the heist. One time in high school, there was a 25-cent soda machine outside of Walmart. I bought a soda, went inside Walmart, and the old lady at the door put a sticker on the can. I then put that sticker on a name-brand can of soda and snickered my way out of the store with my pilfered pop. Been leading the thug life ever since. And obviously, I drank the original soda and then properly disposed of it in the recycling bin before my heist. I'm not a monster, you guys. Back in college, we'd occasionally have parties where we sold shots to make some extra cash. This one particular night, I was on bar duty and the hard stuff was running low. In a panic, I ran into the kitchen and found this pre-mixed alcohol in the fridge. I started selling shots to people, and it proved to be really popular. So popular that I gave it a name, Woodpecker, and started raising the price to keep it from disappearing so fast. At one point, the shots were hovering around $5 or $10. The next day, we were tallying everything, and I mentioned how we made about $80 off this one particular bottle. That's when my roommate started laughing his butt off. It turns out I was selling non-alcoholic whiskey mix he bought at the grocery store for about $3.50. Whoops! My friend managed to get a Target uniform and borrowed a Target name tag from his older brother. Then, during Black Friday, he came in and during the chaos of the night and morning, he walked off with a TV and Xbox. Just today, I walked into Target wearing a red polo shirt without thinking about it. I lost track of how many people were asking me where stuff was. In high school, I sold matchboxes full of chopped garden pest weeds as the other sort of product, Mary J. I had a steady stream of buyers, and technically, I wasn't lying. I also bought fake diet pills from the back of adult magazines in the early 80s. They looked exactly like Pink Hearts, Black Beauties, Yellow Crosses, and the Red Devils. Paid $20 for a bottle of 100, sold them for $1 to $2 per pill. I told the kids my family was mobbed up, and I was the man in senior year. The kids would pay with singles and quarters, so my pockets would jingle when I walked like a cowboy's spurs in a cartoon. Back in 2002, I pretended that I got hacked so somebody would give me a gab. I sold it for 200,000 Neopoints. Now, this is the point where I say something about recognizing this and feeling old, but the thing is, I've heard these words, but I don't know what on earth they mean. So I'm ancient and clueless. I feel equally stumped about the next scam. I will trim your armor for 100K. At a summer concert, a random drunk girl offered me $20 for my freshly refilled 1-liter water bottle. I quickly accepted and vanished into the crowd. I made fake coupons. Anything within a store with a UPC barcode I could generate a UPC barcode for. This was in college when 4 Locos were insanely popular. I made lots of BOGO free coupons that I sold for those. Anything and everything from cigarettes to bagel bites to Xbox 360s. The key was printing them with gloss paper to make them look and feel real no matter how ridiculous the discount was. They all scanned, and only high-priced items got turned down due to suspicious discounts. Like 50% off an Xbox 360 and controllers made people raise eyebrows. I even had a QCat, which is a barcode scanner at home, so I tested them with it. It got to be such a huge thing that it made the local news, and then I stopped. You can learn a lot of cool or illegal crap on the internet when you're bored during your summer break, surfing 4chan. I am a master at forgery. I have all the certificates to prove it. For a while, when I was 17, I sold used undies to weirdos on Craigslist. It didn't start off as a con. I did actually try wearing them, but I wasn't producing a whole lot, so I began using a crusty concoction of tuna oil and mosaic glue. $2 Kmart underwear and paste is $80 profit a pair, a video game's worth. The best bit was receiving congratulatory messages afterwards about the beautiful scent and texture of the fake discharge. Whenever I'm sad, I think about slimy old men whacking the mule into my crusty fish undies, and I can't help but give a fond smile. I watched my friend's dad steal a large, expensive generator from Home Depot. I put it on a flat cart and just walked out, cradling a small dog with one arm and holding a cancelled credit card and an unrelated receipt in his teeth. He nodded at the guy at the door who checks receipts and just left. That was the day I knew what it was to be flabbergasted. I didn't have a stamp to mail a thank you letter, so I put the return address as the address I actually wanted to send it to, then walked down the street and put it in my mailbox. It probably wouldn't have worked if it wasn't a local address. I sold sandwiches at my adult sister's wedding for $1 each. I was 8. I don't know if this counts as a scam, but I got about $30 from a vending machine. I stuffed some paper towels up there in the morning so that it would catch people's change. They'd go to the cafeteria and be reimbursed, so I didn't feel like I was stealing from classmates, just the school. Lunchtime, I took out the paper, and it was like winning at a slot machine. I used to rack up Microsoft points by hosting 10th prestige lobbies that didn't exist. Ah, Modern Warfare 2, how I miss you. Well, I'm not a con artist because I haven't pulled any other scams than this. I know it's a pretty lame and crappy thing to do, but years ago I sold a World of Warcraft account for like $200, then reclaimed the account through Blizzard and kept the money. Then I did the exact same thing with the same account again a month later. To be honest, these stories are kinda making me angry. I'm too lawful good for this crap. I told my mum my Geopet died. I got a new Geopet. I had 2 alive Geopets. A guy tried to scam me out of $450 for a steering wheel I sold, so I scammed him, ending up with $450 from him anyway, and then sold it to someone else for $250. Also, a texting kid rear-ended my car. Really, all it really needed was a respray of the bumper cover. He was a pain in the butt the whole time, wanting to pay me under the table and only like $50. I own a body shop, so I just wrote up a ridiculous repair bill, including using OEM parts, new bumper beam, cover, expensive paint, tons of labor, new exhaust that he dented as well. I'm sorry, kid, but when you hit someone's car, picking how their car gets repaired is not up to you. Solving crimes with the FBI, often using my art forgery skills. When you're so good at being a criminal that the government hires you to stop other crimes. Welcome to the real-life alternative to the DC comic squad of criminals that we unfortunately can't say the name of on YouTube because it has a word for self-deletion in it. Did you work it out, folks? It all started on IMVU. Some of you might know about this site. It's a chat room for teens and adults. You get a little avatar. I had bad luck on the site. I was about 14 and decided to make a female avatar to trick guys into cybering with me, then make fun of them. Well, then I learned I kinda liked it. A few years went by and I was doing it on a different site. This time I'm a 16-year-old girl and I meet this man who wants to be financially dominated. I figure this is my lucky day and do so, making fun of his manhood, and he starts buying me crap on Amazon and shipping it to my house. Honestly, I don't know how I got away with it, because I gave him my real name, saying it was the girl's boyfriend. He wanted to webcam, but obviously I couldn't do that. I'd been photoshopping pictures of random girls to look like this person I was pretending to be, going so far as to put fake sticky notes with his name on them. Eventually we cut it off because I was asking for too much money. I retired the girl and started using a different one. Lo and behold, he messages the new girl. It was insane, and somehow I get him to believe that I'm the original girl's cousin, and we'd been having interfamilial relations. He started buying crap for a while, then we cut it off again. I don't do that anymore, and no, I won't be taking any more questions about it. Look, I'm no con artist, but there was this time many years back when I had no choice but to run a con. If I didn't run it, me and my friend would never have enjoyed as much Taco Bell as we did. I went to a small college in the far north. There was a guy who used to hang out at the edge of our group who talked constantly about loving substances, Hunter S, and stuff like that. There weren't really many dealers around to be had, but we'd take a few of the vitamin Cs we had in our dorm and occasionally sell them to Phil for a few bucks a pop, claiming they were Vicodin, then go get Taco Bell. Our master caper one night was that we needed a lot of Chinese food. So we ground up all the baby laxative that my roommate had been given by his mother because his tummy was off, and sold it to Phil as a blue version of white snow, as the chopped up pills were blue. That was some great Chinese food, and it only ran us $40. Phil later reported that he'd been up for days taking all the stuff we gave him. I imagine he was up for at least some reasons. 10 out of 10 would sell Phil substances again. His immune system rocked, and he was a regular. In 11th grade, I sold my classmate my PC version of Halo Combat Evolved. He asked me the next day about a registration key and asked if that was because he was using a Dell. I told him yes. I had the highest amount of points for my middle school for AR tests. The tests were hidden in the source HTML on each question. I won a trip to Pizza Hut in a limo at the end of the year, but I was the only one that got enough points to go, so it was a little disappointing. What bonkers stunt have you seen someone pull at work and still not get fired? I had a girl steal money from other crew's bags in the locker and changing room. Instead of firing her, they just took the door off the room and put in a camera, so now we have to show up to work in a uniform with a shirt over it. It's very hot here and I end up sweaty by the time I get to work. She also called in one time saying that her sister died and needed some time off. She's an only child. After all of this, she got rehired after she quit for another job that didn't end up working out for her. I work at a web hosting tech support company, and a coworker accidentally deleted another customer's website. This was on a Unix system, so it wasn't possible to undo the delete. He deleted the command history to cover his mistake and then told the customer that the website was lost due to a hard drive failure. The customer hadn't been keeping backups and said that he lost his entire livelihood. The employee told management about the situation, and they ran with it to avoid getting sued. They told the customer that hardware issues sometimes happen, and because he hadn't opted into our managed backup services, the data loss was on him. They offered the customer several months of free web hosting as compensation, and the problem went away for them at least. A week after seeing this play out, I put in my 2 weeks' notice. Used his corporate credit card for over $10,000 in personal purchases. He was reprimanded but not fired or made to pay the company back. Within the next year, he did the exact same thing, and only then was he fired. Damn, someone brought a $300 lamp for their office and expensed it at my last job, and they were fired. I worked at a school for kids who need emotional support. We had a classroom aide who would scream at kids until they cried and then actively mock them for crying. These kids were 7 and came from horrible home situations. It sucked to work in a place that allowed that sort of behavior to continue. She was close family friends with the principal. This was reported. She's still got a letter of recommendation out of her BFF, the principal, but she no longer works with children. It's very hard to help a child when they learn from a young age that adults aren't able to make things better, and that adults are capable of incredibly mean things. They destroyed an overpass with an excavator improperly loaded on a trailer. My goodness, and to think a waiter can be fired if they drop a few glasses or plates at their restaurant. That's like an insignificant fraction of the cost of damages in this story. Disrupting a major traffic point for a couple of weeks is honestly impressive. I bet that guy was glad he had his union. They forged a document, really obviously, and then lied about not forging it. Then they admitted to forging it once the lie was even slightly questioned. A partner at the firm wanted her fired, but then another one didn't, so the forger stayed. Energize a circuit someone was still working on. I had 3 guys from the power company do that to us a couple of years ago. We were inside, still making taps in a gutter, when they re-energized the service without asking if we were done. Knocked my pal off his feet but did no serious damage. We went outside and raised hell, and they got real sheepish and just left for a while. Accidentally send out the entire company of 3,000 plus employees, headcount, to the company distro. File contained everyone's salary, birthday, government numbers, all the good stuff. Saw a guy whip out his equipment and start running around trying to pee on this one other guy. He got a splash on him too. Active duty military here for anyone curious. Guy got caught on CCTV backing up into a BMW at a dealership. Got out, looked at it and just left. He still works here, I don't know how. He must have a video of the boss cheating on his wife or something. A few years ago, I was working in a big company in my hometown. They hired me to create a website because they wanted to get bigger. A graphic and fashion designer in the same company thought I was hired for her department because our offices were close and because I was doing both the programming and the design of the website. I had an appointment with another company that would help us set up secure online payments and manage inventories across our stores and the main factory. The graphic designer welcomed the representatives of this company, which wasn't even her task at all, and then cancelled the appointment and the contract because she didn't believe I was good enough with computers. They called a customer stupid for leaving his phone behind, and then refused to let him back in the theater so he could find it. The phone ended up getting stolen by one of the overnight cleaners, and after a few days was brought back, and the customer finally got his phone back. At a previous job, we had an employee who was called in to clean on an as-needed basis. The employee, who we'll call Fred, owed a lot of child support. After an unusually long break of not working, we called Fred in to clean the workplace. I think he expected to be paid under the table, because when he was given a paycheck it was damn near zero because of all the back-due child support he owed, which we were forced to take from his paycheck. He literally started screaming, swearing, called the boss every name you can think of, punched walls and threatened to shoot up the place. The boss still calls him back to work as needed to clean because he's really good at cleaning. He liked throwing ice cubes into the deep fryer. He'd stand far enough away that he wouldn't get splashed, which made it a complete surprise to the person working the fryer. If you've never done this, it kind of causes a mini explosion of bubbles in molten grease, which splashes everywhere and at the very least makes a mess. When this got too boring, he started stealing kids' meal toys and chucking them into the fryer. It took longer for them to start melting, and if he couldn't get them out, we had to turn the thing off for the rest of the day because it takes hours for it to cool off long enough to retrieve something, and then at least another hour to heat back up. I can't remember what it was he threw, but it caught on fire and he ended up pulling it out with a pair of metal tongs and threw it in the sink. Then he turned on the water and made, to his surprise, a bigger fire. Did he get burned? Yes. Did he get fired? No. Did he do it again? Sort of. I think he went back to ice cubes after that. The boss just kind of shook her head and let him keep working there. My co-workers got caught in a compromising position in the walk-in where the food is stored. There wasn't even a write-up. Neither of them got in trouble. The owners were too busy snorting white snow in the office. The place closed down after losing its liquor license for selling alcohol to minors. It was, not a very well-managed establishment. The store manager got caught adding hours which he didn't work to his time card. He got a reprimand and they removed the ability for managers to edit their own hours. About a month later, he gets caught using another manager's login to add more hours he didn't work. Another slap on the wrist and he's still working at the same place. I worked with a guy who literally had no job. He was the studio supervisor, but there was no activity in the studio to supervise because the studio had effectively become non-operational. He coasted for a full 8 years at this job. He'd come in the morning, open his email, get coffee, gossip and complain about the industry for an hour, leave for an hour, come back for lunch, leave for another 3 hours, come back, send a few emails and then officially leave for the day. It was infuriating and majestic. A guy I worked with ran a food truck into an aeroplane. When they substance tested him, he peed super dirty. After being told that he'd be getting random tests for a while, they showed up at his house within a week. He told them he couldn't because he just smoked yesterday. He was still employed when I transferred from that airport. As a bonus, one day the same guy crapped his pants at work and sat in the break room until the smell became pretty loud. Someone told him he should go home and his response was, "Nah, dog, the damage is already done." My boss forged my name on a number of documents because she didn't have the required certifications to sign the documents herself, and I'd refused to sign them. I know this because after things went horribly south, they tried to claim I'd been the one to screw up and showed me my and her signature. She got promoted again instead of fired, that way I didn't have to quit. You'll never guess whose mother owned the company. I guess that if the company's big enough, there's no such thing as too much fricking nepotism. Honestly, the fact that someone can get promoted despite documented incompetence on nothing other than a family connection is just so damn crappy. I worked at a pizza restaurant when I was 16. The place was absolute anarchy. Impossible to get fired. I'd smoke various substances with my bosses. They joke with me, "Try not to get too blazed today," all while on the clock. The supervisor would take an hour or more on his 30-minute breaks and come back blasted as all hell. We'd all make ourselves free food whenever we wanted. Nobody was trained properly, so obviously proper procedures were out the window. No one would claim their tips, so we were being sued by the IRS. Again, no one followed procedure, so the health department was on our butt. Yikes. I worked at a really nice restaurant, and our head chef at the time would come in so spun out on crystal, he'd admit to people he was seeing shadow people, and would often have us help out on the line only to be a total mess. Also at the same place, one of his other friends who he smoked with was noticeably tweaked and cut half his finger off in the slicer one time. I wouldn't say absolutely bonkers, but I worked closely with the federal government, and the number of people just hanging around until retirement, doing jobs that have been obsolete for 20 years is remarkable. There's a guy I know whose only job is to scan things, like scan paper into PDFs. He's a federal employee being paid $50K a year. I literally do this job. As part of my degree, I must work in a place my college chooses for a semester, but still pay college fees. I scan all day and do nothing else. I'm replacing a man who retired last year who was on $50K, like you said. I take a total of 2 hours off a day for breaks, and I've been told I'm much more efficient than the last guy. I have seen more than 0 nurses mistreat patients. So I've seen too many. Unfortunately, unless it's flagrant and there's enough eyewitnesses, and as long as it's on old people or severely mentally ill people who have little to no family support, nobody gives a flying crap. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Sleep for 3 hours. I was brand new on the job, a corporate thing, and my new coworker came up to me on the weekend and said, "I was up really late last night, I'm going to go lay down for a few minutes." 3 hours later, he woke up and came out to work again without any measure of apology. In the interim, one of the people we worked for found him asleep and told my boss. He got a warning later. Close second being a coworker that hacked the company's network, using the term hacked somewhat loosely, to get an internet access password we weren't allowed to have. Would have gotten away with it if he hadn't also changed their file structure to have folder names like "FU, I want internet access." He also got a warning. An old buddy of mine worked for a really big gaming company in the early 2000s that was just about to ship a major title. Like, major. Because of beta testing, there was a code in the game that would disable the beta copies the day after the game finally dropped. His job was to make sure that code was removed before they burned all of the official CDs for the game's release. Guess who forgot to remove the code? The company had already burned tens of thousands, maybe more, of game discs, and boxed them up for shipment before my buddy realized his mistake and came clean to his boss. They had to reburn, replace, and rebox every copy of the game and do it in time to meet the launch date. Cost a lot of people a lot of extra time and grief, but ultimately my buddy got to keep his job. And for those interested, the company was Bethesda Softworks, and I believe the game was Morrowind. Their offices were in Rockville, Maryland at the time, and I used to go to meet my friend over there for lunch every couple of weeks. If I recall correctly, he was in charge of coding the sky effects for the game. Well, that and removing the code that would brick the game after the release. This one woman screaming at the supervisor at the call center when people were on the phones, cursing, saying she'd beat him up because he gave her too many leads. Whilst working at a local hospital, a nursing student snorting a line of whatever in scrubs in a hospital bathroom to post on Snapchat. Or the 2 housekeepers who engaged in a fistfight on an elevator, only to continue said fight as they arrived at their destination. Finally, one I can answer. Our department went for a team-building overnight stay abroad. The next day, when we were supposed to meet at the airport, he was nowhere to be found. His phone was off, bosses rang the hospitals, missing persons report, you name it. A week later, the bosses went back to the country to find him again. Nothing. Wife and child hadn't heard anything. The week later, he turns up for work like nothing had happened. He decided to jump on an earlier flight to Thailand for a week's holiday without telling a soul. A couple of meetings with the bosses, never mentioned again. I guess his wife made him feel it, but that was never disclosed. I've been on some deployments to disaster-struck areas, and the crap that I've heard and seen is frickin' nuts. My last partner was telling me about his co-workers down south who charged like more than 500 hours of false overtime a year for the last 5 years or so. He was actually hired because the people going over the numbers thought those guys were crazily overworked. Thank God they're finally being investigated. My partner was a whistleblower since he didn't want to be involved. It should be a slam dunk case since they need to swipe their security pass for the work they do, so if they don't show up in the logs, they obviously weren't there. Then there are the people who are old and just refuse to retire because they don't have anything else going on in their lives. Their skills are no longer relevant and they can't or won't develop new ones, but the government can't make them retire, so they send them out on deployments so that their overhead budget doesn't get strained. So here I am in a hurricane-struck area with a 65-plus-year-old guy that can't use a smartphone to navigate and can't drive or write because his hands shake. I thought this was an exaggeration until I saw his writing. It looked like it was from a seismograph, just because his office wanted to push him off on someone else for a couple of months. I mean, for frick's sake, I've got enough to worry about between the crystal heads in rural areas, the weapon crowd worried about looters, and the spotty phone service. It's frickin' adult daycare. I work in the office of a major retailer. I have a coworker who's made several negligent blunders that have costed the company millions in lost sales. He's regularly failed to monitor the flow of advertised goods until it's too late to react, and we've lost sales. He once decided that if someone he works with F's up, it isn't his problem to fix or even report. He wouldn't even tell them about it so they could fix it. Of course, it's quite literally his problem to fix it. This has caused lots of failed shipments and flows that again caused lost sales. He failed to monitor inventory levels on regular stock items. Sales obviously spiked during Christmas time, which has caused him to run out on half his inventory and thus lose sales. As of yet, he still hasn't fully normalized all of it. To my knowledge, he's only gotten a formal reprimand for that last one. How it took so long is beyond me. And yet, the retail salespeople are the ones on minimum wage and getting screamed at because the store doesn't have a certain brand of wax strips by Karens. Maybe switch one of the higher-performing floor staff out with this guy. Punishment and promotion meted out all at once. We hired this woman to my team. Her job was to do exactly what I did. We work from home, but we have constant conference calls and a ton of work to do. It's simply not possible to slack off without being noticed. I trained her and she shadowed me for a couple of months. She should have been ready to go off on her own, but she kept asking the same questions again and again. It's like she wasn't even sort of listening to anything we said, which was super annoying. But then, about 3 months in, she disappeared. Like stopped logging into calls, stopped logging into Skype, stopped everything. We emailed, texted, and called for a while until she finally responded that she had been in hospital with a hernia. Now, my mother had a hernia surgery in her 70s and was home within a few hours. So that's a red flag. We were also stunned and deeply offended that she never ever bothered to call, text, email, or anything to say she'd be out. Never in my 20-year career have I seen anything like it. In my personal opinion, I thought she would have been fired right then and there. But our boss didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She didn't want to tell the big boss, for some reason. I'm still baffled by that, but that meant neither the powers that be nor HR had any idea it had ever happened. So eventually, after having fallen off the planet for 10 days, the new hire finally came back. Both our boss and I counseled her a lot about communication. I mean, things happen, we get it, just talk to us. Let us know what's going on. Benefit of the doubt, right? Yeah. A little over a month later, she did it again. At first, I noticed she wasn't joining calls or logging into Skype, and she kept saying she was having connectivity issues. Fine. Once again, just tell us. And for God's sake, call tech support. But then she was offline for an entire week, so we tried hunting her down again. Nothing. No response, no communication, nada. This time, the issue was escalated and HR got involved. After a total of 2 weeks, she apparently told HR she was having medical issues. She was counseled that she had to log on and fill out her timesheets to reflect she was out of office for all the time she was gone. She was given a deadline of a week to do this. It never happened, and she was still employed. Please note that at this point she still hadn't spoken a word to either myself or our boss. So now we're at 3 weeks of radio silence, and HR contacts our boss to say the new hire had reached out to say she's filing short-term disability. Fine, whatever. We wait, and we wait, and wait. And obviously she never filed. So finally, a month after disappearing for the second time with zero communication, she was terminated. The amount of work I had to pick up thanks to her disappearing act was madness. I'm talking upwards of 80 hours a week for more than a month. I'm still bitter about it. Wisconsin. Pretty nice hotel. Our room service chef. I got in for the night and my coworker is fielding a call of a very loud guest. I can tell it's going badly. Very badly. He hangs up, looks down in sadness for a bit, gets up and slowly walks to the kitchen. His next words were burnt into my head. John, can I see your hand?" The cook looks down and notices his band-aid is missing and made its way into a pizza that went up to a customer. He said his wife had it in her mouth. No, not fired. A guy who works at a local grocery store would get caught whacking the mule at work with the bathroom stall door open. He was caught so much that he was eventually relocated to the gas station, and he has a serious attitude problem because he thinks it's because he's overweight. Repeatedly sleep. Not like a 2-minute doze, I'm talking hours. He's been caught multiple times and was even filmed twice by a new hire. Union won't let him be touched, not even a suspension. Our union rep walked into my cube to talk to a guy who was asleep. Instead of waking him up or anything, he just quietly said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and walked off to do whatever it was that he did. Don't sleep at your desk is right in the union rules, come on. I'm glad I don't work there anymore. My female coworker printed off undressed photos of a male coworker and passed them out like flyers. Didn't even get a write-up. I was out to lunch with 3 coworkers. Collectively, there are 2 males and 2 females. We were all attorneys, by the way. One of the males is very into the other woman. She is also a hijab-wearing Muslim woman. The male coworker proceeds to get up from eating and starts to massage her head. Her hijab starts to fall off. We all tell him to stop. He explained that he was getting the brain spiders off. I was mortified. She was. So was the other male. But he continued working there. I worked from home at my last job, and my coworker would sometimes just not log in until like 11 a.m. and would just completely skip meetings that she was supposed to run. One time she missed a meeting with our boss, and my boss just goes, "Well, I bet she was up working late, so she's coming in later." I knew a guy whose wife worked at a place called Happy Joe's Pizza. He just got out of prison after 26 years. He put a fire poker through a crystal head's chest and killed him. His wife would let him in when they closed, and they'd do the deed on the make table, and he just said he'd splooge all over the meats and cheeses regularly for 2 years. I am so glad I live on the other side of town. I work in the healthcare field. I had one coworker who'd never wasted his narcotics properly with a witness. He'd just have them signed out solo and say, "Oh yeah, the patient didn't want them, so I disposed of it," with zero verification. He also had a lot of liquid narcotics whose counts suddenly went mysteriously off after he'd been on shift. Somehow he didn't get fired or even investigated. He wound up quitting after just a few months, and good riddance, to be honest. I had 8 servers delivered very late one day and left outside the data center. Everything in boxes on a pallet. The janitor thinks it's trash, takes all of them to the trash compactor and just crushes them. Each box weighed more than 80 pounds. They weren't ours, but a company we contracted with. We had to buy all new servers, and the guy didn't even get a write-up. He had a family member on the board. The janitor is an idiot, but who just leaves a bunch of servers outside a data center? This data center in Maybury or something? What's the most uncanny coincidence you've ever experienced? My old work ran a secret Santa once the week before Christmas. It was a $10 limit, and the person I was buying for I didn't know very well. I left my buying to the last minute because I just didn't know what to get her. So I was in town and walking past some shops when lo and behold I see an old copy of Oliver Twist in the window of the second-hand bookstore. It just called to me, so I went in and picked it up. I checked the first page for the cost, and guess what? $10. Perfect. So, come the day of the Secret Santa, we were all opening our gifts, some 150 people. Out of the corner of my eye, I see some people crowding around a woman who's crying. I keep listening, and people are calling out for the person who was her Santa. I go over and reveal that it was me. The lady I'd bought for was crying and hugged me. She said 10 years ago her house burned down along with all of her possessions. The book that I bought her was her favorite, and also the exact same edition, so had the exact same cover she remembered. Because it was a second-hand book, it was even weathered in the same places she remembered. So it was as if I'd grabbed the book off her shelf before the fire and delivered it to her 10 years later. Here in my little town in northwest England, there's a good kebab shop from which the lads and I have ordered for years. We've been there after countless nights out and had them deliver to our doors, so we know the guys who work there pretty well. They're mostly Turkish. Once a few of us got together for a short break in Turkey. Having got off the plane, we waited in the car park outside for another pal who'd been on a different flight. As we stood soaking in the ambience of the new country, none other than the tall guy from our local kebab shop in the UK walked across the road right in front of us, 2,000 miles from home. That was weird. Seeing Paul McCartney of the Beatles on TV in 2001 and noticing that he was tall. Next day, I'm walking down a very quiet street, and walking towards me is a really tall guy, and it's Paul McCartney. He must have seen my expression, so he veered my way, stuck his hand out and said, "Hi, mate." I was shocked. 18 years later, and I'm still shocked. Crazy. Then he briskly walked away. A very brief encounter, but very important for me. I also wouldn't blame anyone for not believing me. It's a weird story. I used to get 2 buses home from work. I got off the first one, having left my phone and keys on the front seat of the bus without realizing. Got on the second bus, went to my favored front seat, and my possessions that I didn't know were missing were waiting for me. The bus had changed driver and route. It still freaks my nut out to this day. That's what we in the business of life call a freebie, my friend. I have never in my life got back anything I've left on the bus, and that list of objects is irritatingly long and growing. And I've tried very hard to get some of those items back. If you'd had to call the bus company about finding this stuff, I'm willing to bet that you would have never found it. Nobody believes me when I tell this story, but one day my husband and I ran into the same couple in 3 different places in 2 different states. So my husband and I had an errand to run out of state. We left early and stopped to get breakfast. The couple was sitting across from us. The lady had a funky shirt, which is why she stuck out in my mind. After breakfast, we drive to the next state over to the office that we have an appointment at. We're waiting in the lobby and the couple from breakfast walks in. Weird. So we spend the day finishing up our errands and then we drive back home. I didn't feel like cooking, so we stopped to get some dinner at the pub. We sit down at the table, and guess who's already eating at the table behind us? The same frickin' couple. I was in St. Augustine on vacation. On the way there, I just happened to think about this girl I knew back in college in Orlando. Just sort of wondered what she was up to and the like. Sure as heck, I ran into her in a bar there the first night. She was there celebrating graduating from PA school. Similar thing happened to me. I dated this guy Steven when I was in my late 20s, and we lived together for a year and then we broke up, and I was devastated. It had been about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years since I'd seen him when I was walking in Santa Monica with my best friend, and I said to her, "You know what's weird? Steven and I have so many friends in common, and I've never seen him in this whole time since we broke up." 5 minutes after that, we walked across the street and into a restaurant, and who's sitting there but Steven? Me and a friend took some tabs of A one night, and we were tripping hard. Decided to walk to a gas station and get some smokes or something. We walked by a car lot in the small town I'm from, and all of the cars in the lot were cop cars. We were both walking ramrod straight all the way to the store, very quietly bought whatever we wanted there, then took a back street back to his place. We just stared at each other for like an hour and didn't speak until after we got there. Turns out the city had brought a whole new fleet of cop cars and they'd all been delivered there and were just on the lot for that night. Was sitting in a restaurant about 200 miles from where I live, telling my mother, who was visiting from a different country, about a trip I had to another country about 6,000 miles away, with a work colleague. And the lady at the table next to us leans over and says, "I think you're talking about my son." Turns out I was sitting next to my colleague's parents while showing my mum pictures of our trip. I was in Paris and some Americans were lost. They were the grandparents of my high school classmates from Nebraska. It's a small world. In grade 10 English class, the teacher didn't have anything planned for us to do, and it was close to the end of the year, I guess. So she goes to the big cupboard in the corner and pulls out a stack of copies. It's examples of a successful essay written during a final exam. So we can learn what a good one looks like and how to build a narrative, stuff like that. The topic of these was, what was the most pivotal moment of your life? There's 3 examples ranging in proficiency. We read through the first 2, and I volunteer to read the last one aloud. I start reading, and I stop. The essay was about me. My big sister had gotten a really good mark 6 years earlier on her final exam essay, which she wrote about the day I was born. I got pretty emotional about that one. Worked a half day. Drove 6 hours from Southern California to Northern California for car camping with my wife. Chose an obscure campground which was nearly deserted, off-season, picked the most deserted and remote campsite location. We planned on rocking the tent. Then we were bummed after setting camp and another couple selects the site right next to us. Turned out to be a coworker I'd spoken with earlier that day. I hadn't told the coworker anything about plans. We weren't close. Earlier that day, we spoke briefly of a work-related issue. My wife and I were in Tucson visiting my mother who'd just moved there. My wife decided she wants a tamale. We drove around for 2 hours, stopping in restaurants looking for tamales. Couldn't find one. Went back to my mother's apartment. Literally 2 minutes later, someone knocked on the door of my mother's apartment, asking us if anyone wanted to buy tamales. One year I got a roommate through Craigslist. The guy was weird for sure, but good-natured and paid rent. Anyway, after about 2 months of living with him, my cousin comes over to hang. I introduced the two, and my cousin in the most chill voice ever said, "Nah man, we know each other." Turns out they were college roommates 5 years earlier in another state. Not me, but a pretty interesting story in my family. 2 of my great-grandfathers got imprisoned in the same jail and served time together. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was an architect and even drew my other great-grandfather's house. Just 2 dudes in prison. My parents got together over 30 years after their incarceration. I think they found out when my grandparents met each other. This is also kind of like a dark spot on the family's history, and my grandparents don't like to talk about it. My sister Emily was on a ski lift in New Mexico when some younger girl across from her asked if her name was Emily. Apparently, the stranger, who looked kind of similar but underage, had found her lost ID the year prior and had been using it for a year to buy alcohol. And it gets weirder. She was later hiking with friends for 17 hours. They got tired, thumbed for a hitchhike, and got picked up by this girl's twin. I met a Canadian guy while on holiday in South America, and we ended up going sightseeing together. At the end of the day, a person behind us tapped him on the shoulder and asked if the scar behind his ear was from cancer surgery. They got talking. Turns out they were from the same small town in Canada, had the same type of brain cancer, and had been operated on by the same surgeon. I moved from my small hometown, halfway across the country, to a small city where I knew absolutely no one. At the first party I went to in the new town, I started chatting with a guy. Turns out he'd also just left my small hometown. Haha, I hope that the introductions were drawn out by both of you just saying, "Oh, but you wouldn't have heard of where I'm from," and just referring to it as my little town in the sticks, before you finally realized that you basically only had the same stories. Was at the dentist getting a crown extension. The dentist said, "Hey, you were born on July 13th, so was I." His assistant piped up, "Me too." We all shared a look of surprise and longing with each other, longing to be closer. Then they drilled the absolute F out of my teeth. Had a kidney transplant last year. The nurse makes a comment about it having my name on it. He then elaborated to say that the donor had the same surname as me. An officer from a different police department was showing me a picture of the guy they wanted to arrest in a different part of town. As I look up from my computer, I see the guy riding by on a bike, literally 5 feet away from the squad car. I can imagine this like it's a scene from a movie. "Yep, we never could catch the genius," said Genius passes by slowly on a bike. "He sure was an elusive son of a witch." Said son of a witch waves at the cop waves back. "Yeah, we've really just given up at this point. Who knows where he is? He could be halfway across the country by now." 2 years ago, I was in Tokyo on holiday. I looked on Instagram and saw an old friend post a story showing he was also in Tokyo. We hadn't spoken in a few years, but I sent him a message letting him know we were in the same city. Not even 5 minutes later, we walked into a bar and he was standing there. This past November, I was in Toronto on business. After dinner, we went to a pub downtown. The first person I saw when I walked in was the same friend from Tokyo. We both live in Winnipeg. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was at a convention. There were only a few people in the room. My friend and I wanted an autograph from a voice actor. He started singing in his character voice. There were 2 random guys next to me. One pulled out a video camera to record it. Years later, my husband and I are talking with friends and the convention comes up. The guy with the video camera was my husband. I also took a picture later that day of the crowds, and he's in that picture. I stood next to my husband years before I met him and didn't even realize it. I have an uncommon last name and a not too common first name. I was in the hospital for surgery, and the person in the next room was there for the same surgery. Came to find out that we were second cousins and never knew that the other existed. He had the same name as me, and his wife had the same name as my wife. I've had several small world experiences, but the biggest was talking to a girl after my first university class and discovering through the course of a 2-hour-long conversation that our grandmothers had been each other's maids of honor and my aunt and her mum were best friends since childhood. Back in the early to mid-90s, the phone system changed and you no longer needed to dial the area code for a long-distance in-state call. We're a small state with only one area code. One morning I woke up to the phone ringing, and when I picked it up I recognized the voice on the other end as belonging to my old boss from a few years ago. She had an unmistakable voice. We had a nice conversation for a bit before she realized she had dialed the wrong number. I lived in a different part of town in a different part of state, but the number must have just been off by only one digit from the one she had tried to call. To add to the coincidence, I'd overslept and would have been late if she hadn't called me and woken me up. Both of my grandfathers were named William, and both grandmothers were named Joyce. There are at least 2 ways that could happen, and only one involves a wild coincidence. Started dating a girl a few weeks ago. We got to talking about where we lived and stuff. She lives in not only the same building, but the exact same apartment I lived in 2 years ago. It was so frickin' bizarre walking into my old apartment that I never thought I'd see again. What are the odds? The person who sits next to me at work copies everything I do, except she has no way of knowing. I wear a blue sweater, she wears a blue sweater. I bring leftover spaghetti, she brings leftover spaghetti. It's so weird I almost hate her. When I was 18, I lived in a town a very long ways away from where I ended up moving. I struck up a friendship with this guy from work in that town. We played Halo, watched movies, etc. He was awesome. I ended up moving suddenly due to a family emergency, and I never got his contact info. I didn't even remember his name a decade later, but I thought of him often as he was an awesome guy through all the years. 11 years later, I'm working at my job, carpooling with someone from my training class, and one night he asks if I mind his roommate being in the car, as he was going to take the car after we got off at work and use it for the night. He introduces us. I turn around and in the back seat is the guy from the town a very long ways away. We reconnected immediately and now live together. He's my best friend for sure, and the godfather to my children. When I was a kid, around 13, I played a lot of a video game called Diablo 2. I started a clan with a few people I'd met on the internet, and we played every day. At some point, we were helping some random person and he asked to join. We thought he was nice enough, so we let him in. As part of this clan, we had a shared account that we used to store game items for each other. After about a month of playing, this new guy goes in and changed the password, steals the account and defriends everyone. Completely disappears off the map with all of our stuff. Fast forward a year later, and my family moves to Texas, and it's my first day at school. I'm sitting in algebra class talking to the person in the seat next to me, and he mentions he plays Diablo. I said, me too, that I ran a clan and everything. I asked his username, and it was him. 2,000 miles away from where I first virtually met this guy, he's sitting next to me in math class. When I told him mine, his face went into total shock, and he didn't know how to respond. It was awkward for sure. Ended up telling him I didn't care and was over it, but let's just say we didn't end up becoming friends. I wonder what was going through his head at that moment. Whether you, the new kid from out of town, had in fact come to the Lone Star State to exact vengeance, beat him up in front of his peers and take your hard-won account back. Kind of disappointing to have it just be a, okay moment. Funny though. When I was 1 year old, we moved to a city some 500 kilometers away from where I was born. 15 years later, my father decided to put me in a frickin' boarding school in the area of that first city, because he went there too. I got randomly put in a room with 2 other guys, which one of them is still my best friend today. When I first visited that friend at his home, I discovered that he not only lives in the same city as we did, which isn't too much of a coincidence I guess, as it's the only major city in that area, but in the same frickin' house. Of course I couldn't remember our old house, so I called my father to confirm that it's the same address, and it turns out that he very briefly knew my friend's family from selling the house. Last summer I went to New York with my family for a week. A friend of mine that I hadn't seen since she graduated from college was living and working in New York at the time, so we decided to meet up for drinks. As we were walking through Times Square at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, who did we see on the other side of the street but another friend of ours from college? I knew he had been living in New Jersey, but he was in New York for a grinder date. The 3 of us went to a bar and talked about life and how none of our friends live in Ireland anymore. They've all moved abroad. It was bittersweet and a crazy coincidence that 3 friends from a small university in Dublin would serendipitously meet in New York City. Went to college, met a cute girl. Where did you go to school? She asks. You've never heard of it, I reply. I grew up in a town of 1,200 people and graduated in a class of about 90. Try me, she says. And that was the beginning of finding out that not only had she heard of it, she had almost attended it because her family had lived in one of the neighboring towns very briefly when she was growing up. We shared dozens of mutual friends and had apparently spent our young lives narrowly missing each other. Later, after we started dating, we learned that one of our mutual friends had been trying to set us up with each other for years. She was overwhelmed with laughter when she saw that we were finally together completely without her involvement. I asked her to marry me, she said yes. We went out to dinner with our parents so they could finally meet. Her folks arrived at the restaurant and see mine, and her mum goes, "Oh, hey John, so this is your son, huh?" They'd been co-workers years ago. Of course. We've been married for 11 years now, got a good thing going. We intend to keep it up. When I was a kid while hiking with my dad, I was babbling and said, "The teacher told us if you speak too much, a fly will get in your mouth." In that exact moment, a fly flew into my mouth. I'd recently moved cities and had a new local phone number. Had to make a lot of calls to various utilities and stuff to get everything set up. I called one of them, was speaking with the customer service rep, all was going fine until she asks for my phone number. When I tell her, she starts freaking out on me. "Who are you? How did you find me? How do you know that phone number?" Eventually, I managed to get her calmed down to the point where we could figure out what was going on. Turned out she had been in a really bad relationship where her ex had stalked and harassed her, including him and his friends making threatening phone calls constantly. Eventually, she had to move to a different part of the city and take a new unlisted phone number. My new phone number was her old one, and the moment I said it, she assumed he had tracked her down once again and that the stalking was about to begin anew. I'm not sure she truly believed me when I explained it all, but we eventually got through the phone call. When my best friend and I were about 16 years old, we'd both had a bunch of coins we were taking to Coinstar at Kroger. We had the exact same total in coins down to the last penny. My best friend in high school had the exact same locker combination as me in a school of 1,200 people. Saw a combo written on a piece of paper of his, and I asked why he wrote down my combo. He looked confused and said that's his combo. The combination locks are changed and reassigned each year. In freshman physics, I became friends with the Japanese kid next to me. After a while, he was helping me with my Japanese homework. Did really well after that, by the way. But after that class, we kind of drifted apart. Fast forward 2 years where I'm an exchange student in Japan over the summer and doing some sightseeing in Kyoto after the program. I was crossing the street in Kyoto and I heard my name being called out. I look around and there he is. Thousands of miles apart, we meet again. We got some drinks and good food together. It was a blast. No, his hometown was not Kyoto. He was also doing sightseeing while home for the summer. Oh, definitely the shadow eggplant incident. One night in university, I was fooling around with my then-girlfriend and noticed that the brightness of the TV caused us to cast distinct shadows on the wall behind us. Being 19 and a fool, I took this opportunity to take a Snapchat of the shadow of my manhood on the wall and sent the pic to my best friend. I thought it would elicit an interesting reaction, but could not have prepared for what was next. You see, on Snapchat, you can see when someone receives your message as well as when it's opened. So, as my message is sending, still unopened by him, I receive a Snapchat from the same guy. I open it and lo and behold, what do I see? A shadow dingle snap. This man decided, at the exact same time I did, to send an identical pic of his appendage's shadow on the wall. Both of our girlfriends were confused, thinking it was some inside joke, when in reality we'd never spoken of or sent shadow sausages ever before. In short, I decided to snap a pic of my pecker's shadow to my best friend at the exact same time he decided to do the same. What was the most pretentious college application you've ever seen? I got to interview some students for a special program in my undergrad. It was highly competitive and lots of people wanted in. A young lady comes in, I offer her a seat. "Oh, I'd prefer to stand, thanks. This won't take long." "Oh, it won't?" "No, my dad is the dean of one of the colleges and my mum is one of the professors who established this program. I'm getting in." I emphasized that she should really take a seat. She refused again. So I say, "Hey, this interview? Me approving you is part of the process. You have to do well in this to get in. You'll say I did well or my parents will make life hell for you." Her parents had zero impact on anything in my life and I told her as such. After articulating this to her, I said, "I'm going to give you a chance to walk out the door and restart this interview. Fresh start." She lost it and yelled at me. For like 5 minutes. I filled out the interview sheet with direct quotes from her tantrum. She didn't get in. A few days after my decisions were made, I got an email from her father who was, in fact, a dean. He asked me to come in and have a chat with him. It was totally a request. I went to talk to him. When I went to see him, he had a copy of the interview sheet where I had several direct quotes from his daughter. Some of the quotes were awful and directed at me, my family, and basically everything she could hit on. He apologized profusely for his daughter and asked if she could redo the interview. He was leaning on me a bit at this point. I told him that choices had already been made and she was not selected. The whole thing was mind-blowing. She was so entitled. I worked in a very religious private school's admissions department for a few weeks, filing applications. The parents had to write a letter about their child and why the school would suit them. I'll always remember the man who wrote 3 pages about how successful a businessman he was, how he owned several businesses, how good he was at the school's main sport, and then attached a large check to the last page. Not a word about the kid. What I remember most? The rejection letter from the principal with a thinly veiled insinuation that bribery was immoral and not acceptable at the school. Well, that's a refreshing rebuke to what I imagine would be a successful tactic to most schools, albeit a tactic you'd normally at least disguise as a donation. I hope the kid got into a good place where he could maximize his potential anyway. I'm just glad he won't be using Dad's credentials to breeze through and have a shock when he finishes. At this particular school anyway. They probably just did this at another. I was a medical school interview coach, earning some extra money through med school. Some applicants were great, others were what you'd expect from kids whose parents are paying a tutor to teach them how to act normal. Our med school interviews are easy to pass, but difficult to do well in. They involve generic questions like your passions or interests, ethical scenarios, decision-making questions, knowledge of healthcare topics, stuff like that. There have been memorable answers to mock questions. In terms of pretentious, I asked one guy what his hobbies were, and he said he loved Armani suits and buying expensive coffee blends. Not a great answer, but what killed it was that he began describing the smoothness of the bean, and licking and smacking his lips together in wet, squelching noises. Another applicant's dad was a successful surgeon, so he argued in his answers, "I basically already know how to be a doctor through osmosis." He'd failed the entrance exam 7 times, and his dad opened a lot of doors for him, getting him research editor positions for his CV, stuff like that. There were complex family dynamics. He'd say really inappropriate things like, "When I'm a doctor, I can buy and sell you and all your friends." Or, "All I have to do is pass this stupid exam and interview and my dad will get me a spot in the training program. You'll be struggling for years." He'd then flip back to complaining for half an hour about how his sister gets treated like a princess and call me at 10 p.m. just to talk. I declined further sessions, but was pretty sympathetic to be honest. Whenever his dad called to arrange sessions and materials, he was very pejorative towards his son. I had trouble hearing him during one of the phone calls because of the background noise until he stepped outside. Later found out that he'd been calling me, a tutor, during his son's graduation ceremony. He missed his son going on stage to receive his diploma because he was arranging a booking time with me. It placed a lot of his son's defensive behavior in context. And no, he hasn't been accepted into a med school. That was 2 years ago, and he emailed only a few weeks ago to request access to my Google Drive to brush up on some things. I granted it because when your answer to a conflict and teamwork question is, "I'd tell them I'm sorry that they're wrong," no amount of Microsoft Word documents will change your performance. The letter simply said something along the lines of, "Let me into this hall named after Grandpa. He donated a crap ton of money, so this letter means nothing." Well, he was right. He got in. Gotta love pay to play. College bribery scandal, but legal. Oh, I have one. A longtime friend's mother reviews applications at an elite college. I saw her recently, and she was telling us about some of the essays. One was from a girl who clearly came from a background of great privilege. She described a day of shopping and dining at swanky places with her parents in the big city one day. At the end of the day, she came across a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk begging for money for food. She initially passed by him, but then, seeing the American flag flying on the corner, ahead on the next block, she remembered what this great country of ours was built on, as well as what life is truly about, and went back to give this homeless person her restaurant leftovers. All described with much self-congratulation. I'm paraphrasing a lot of it, but the part I just quoted is exact and will likely be repeated for some time to come, accompanied by chuckling by my friend and me. The country was built on, and life itself is about giving a homeless person your half-eaten burger and fries. Oh my god. We recently had someone we rejected for our most competitive course email us. He said he regretted to inform us that he was unable to accept our rejection and would see us on the first day of the course very soon. One with $100 in it. No, we didn't pocket it and deny them, we sent it back. I went to space camp on a scholarship program after writing an essay to get in. One of the kids in my group, who time and time again proved he wasn't smart enough to write his own essay, bragged about how his mother wrote his and he didn't even want to be there. Messed up on both their parts to take away an opportunity from someone who actually wanted to go. For me, it's the students that disparage the very ones that provide their application support. The kids that bash their coaches for not starting them in their sports game, or complain about their teachers who give them too much homework. Meanwhile, the recs and coaches are writing about how great the kid is. It's just not a good look. I was a master's student who helped a family friend's high schooler edit her college admission essay. The prompt was something about the greatest struggle they've experienced that made them who they are. Her response? My greatest struggle in life was that I was too academically advanced for my age and I wasn't challenged enough in school. Yikes. A whole essay from this one girl about how it had long been my dream to study at the prestigious University of Leicester and all the incredible gifts life would bestow on her for living her dream, in an application for a university that was not Leicester. Well, you see, the narrator has done that with job applications, back in the day where he was sending out 5 of the buggers a day. It's an easy mistake to make. This lady might have been a terrific student for all you know. She also just happened to be copy-pasting different university names into the same letter draft, and then accidentally sending them off, which I will admit is not a great look. I once got a binder with 19 letters of recommendation from what seemed like every adult who'd ever vaguely met the student. We also got photocopies of her scuba license and lifeguard certification. This was just for a college with a 98% acceptance rate. We also had an essay question that was, if you could spend a day with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would it be and why? And some kid wrote about how the college admissions racket discounted who he was as an individual and that he wanted to spend the day with the college admissions officer so that they'd really get to know him. Came off as a bit creepy, and again, 98% acceptance rate. If you can write a coherent sentence and didn't murder anyone, you were going to be accepted. We didn't freaking care about your personality. Here's a summary of the questions I'm getting about these letters. So firstly, the matter of criminal records. I worked with international students who were going to get visa applications rejected with felonious pasts. Letting them down early prevented them from spending a lot of time or money trying to enroll when they wouldn't be able to. And why we had an essay with that kind of acceptance rate? It was to make sure the students could string a few sentences along and weed out the students who weren't willing to put in the effort and had no intention of enrolling. And the scuba girl was not applying for marine biology. Only 3 or 4 letters came from people who seemed to have strong relationships to her. The rest were very vague, brief, polite letters from people who were vague acquaintances, sometimes from several years prior, like her childhood camp counselor who had her for 1 week in 4th grade. It was a waste of our time to read them as they told us nothing. She sent us a copy of her scuba certification, but there was another certificate, like 7th grade honor roll or something, that was original, so we ended up paying to mail the entire binder back to her in the end, so she'd have her original. It was also annoying as frick because it didn't fit in our filing cabinet and had to live on my desk for months. I'm not disclosing the school I work at, but it was a private non-profit. I actually honestly believe the faculty were good instructors and the students were going to get a decent education. Being tuition revenue reliant, virtually no endowment, they made some cynical decisions in the admissions office to make it appear we were more competitive and selective, because most people, especially parents who can write a check, assume that's the only mark of a good school. I used to tutor at a uni and helped occasionally with my tutees' applications. One thing I always encouraged them to do was to mention their aspirations after graduating, and to mention why specifically this university. One kid who'd been a pretentious butthole the whole time actually wrote in his essay that he didn't really care about the academic part because his dad was just going to give him a job when he graduated anyways. He chose the unis he was applying to based on how impressive they sounded and how good the party life was. I kept in touch with his sister. She was super smart and studied the same subject as me, so I helped her with career advice and stuff later on. She dropped into conversation later with a noticeable bit of glee that her brother was going through a challenging patch because his father informed him that no, Daddy was not going to give him a free ride into a cushy job and did in fact expect him to get a real job. The sister is definitely the smart one, but especially for staying in touch. I've tried to help various young workers in my field, but it's amazing how many just completely fail to realize how important networking is. Not so much as in the, I know a guy who's going to give me a sweet job thing, but more in the, here's someone who's been where I am and I can use the advice. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I reviewed an application from someone with test scores and grades in the upper percentiles of the school's average. As long as the essay was inoffensive and decent, we would have let him in. But his essay was easily the most awful thing I'd ever read, to the point where I assumed he was trying to sabotage his application. However, after we rejected him, he, not his parents, called the school complaining and sent an appeal begging for acceptance. The essay started out okay. The first paragraph he talked about why he chose this school, that was the prompt, and what he hoped to achieve in his time at college. So far so good. But then it got weird. He talked about how he wanted to stop discrimination. This applicant was white, by the way, and how he saw racism for the first time in middle school kickball. Whenever a black kid would come up to bat, all of the outfielders would spread out. The applicant described this as systemic racism, and his way of solving it was to kick the ball further than any black person on his team, which he did. First of all, the whole racism topic came out of nowhere and the story didn't tie into anything. After this, he started talking about his favorite podcasts, even mentioning some by name. If you want to know more about my personality, just listen to this podcast. You'll get a better understanding of who I am as a person. He closed the paper by saying, "I'd like to close this paper with a quote," which I thought was a joke because there was nothing left on the page, just that single sentence. Apparently, he had just hit enter on his keyboard a bunch of times, because on the next page was the quote that he wanted to close the essay with. It was a full page-long manuscript of a Richard Pryor comedy routine about going to Africa for the first time. Yep, he kept in all of the N-words in the routine and even went so far as to replace all of the soft R's with hard R's for no apparent reason. At the end were 3 links to the podcast he mentioned, which I didn't listen to because the essay was printed out when I read it, so I couldn't click the links. Oh boy. So this might debatably be a definition of high intelligence, low wisdom, but very selectively high intelligence for whatever he had done in school. Because how sheltered do you have to be to not realize that a single N-word in any body of text that you swear you'd live by is probably going to be a deal breaker in any place? Do better, idiot kid. I'm a college admissions consultant, and the worst one I've read was a full meta-essay about how much the applicant loved college admissions and writing admissions essays. It was arrogant and aloof throughout, but the kicker was when the student called herself an elite applicant with outstanding admissions essay skills right there in the essay. I felt sorry for her because it felt like the stress of the process had given her a Stockholm Syndrome obsession with it. I tried to bring her back to reality gently, but she wasn't having it. She did not get in. Shocked Pikachu face. I was part of an admissions committee when I served as faculty at a wonderful university. One admissions essay compared his act of applying to the law school with that of a Palestinian child facing oppression. The closing line was, "Bravery comes in many forms. A Palestinian child picking up a stone against illegal occupation and me writing this essay, both are comparable." This was written in 2019, by the way. I still haven't forgotten it. Being a professor is a weird and amazing thing. Oh, the stories I have. I used to help out with auditions for the acting program at my school, and one girl came in with a scented resume. Before she walked in, the head of acting was like, "During the interview, do not mention the resume." She was not a good actor. The scented resume was clearly something she thought was cute and charming enough to score her some personality points. Nope. Elle Woods as an actress? I've evaluated placement essays for first-year writing, first semester, second semester, or in rare cases, tested out completely. I remember reading one about how selfies were important because of reasons such as, so people can know where you are, and if you travel you can use them to take pictures of monuments and landmarks. This student essentially, though I'm not sure intentionally, made the argument that every picture has to be a selfie, and that if they aren't, the picture isn't worth anything. I put them in first semester. Yikes, I've read kinda good essays about selfies. In the past, rich people would pay a lot of money to have paintings done of themselves, but now anyone can admire a picture of themselves, and documenting when you feel good about yourself is good for your self-esteem. That's where I thought they were going with this. I saw an LSAT writing prompt that started with the line, "The leader of the Third Reich had a few good ideas." Really, doesn't matter what you say after that, it also had absolutely nothing to do with the prompt. For clarity, the LSAT has a prompt that consists of some group trying to make a decision between 2 mundane options. Your goal is to argue for one option over the other. That's it. In no way, shape, or form did the scenario have anything remotely to do with Mr. H, nor did this person pick one of the sides. He simply wrote an essay about this particular historical figure. Have fun not getting into law school. I used to do a little recruitment from time to time for a large cruise line based in the UK. I once had an application through where the applicant's CV was literally him asking himself questions and then proceeding to answer them. It read something like this. So you're probably thinking, who is this guy? Well, I'm a hardworking individual who isn't afraid to go above and beyond. Why go above and beyond, you say? Well, I believe the customer always comes first, blah blah blah, etc. You get the idea. Every essay that uses famous quotes as if they're the first person to ever think of using a famous quote in an essay. Nope, you're not original. I actually don't mind quotes if there's a good story attached to it, but it's rare. People usually just throw in a random quote to sound smarter or more cultured. Execution is the key here. Also, when people write about my school to make it sound like they've done their research and they've clearly just regurgitated information from the website, I know where I work. I don't need you to recite the website back to me. Also, now I'm worried you'll get busted for plagiarism if you become a student here, because you clearly just copied and pasted our website content into your essay. Don't make someone question your academic integrity in your admissions essay. Oh God, it was me. I wrote about how anti-intellectual religion was. I don't even remember the prompt. That was just what I was writing about no matter what. Every other word was a thesaurus drop-in. Jesus fricking Christ, it was bad. It's not about the fedora on your head, it's about the fedora in your heart. Oh, I love this. But for more than one reason. Although the milady fedora presence is very strong here, I also love that you've grown enough as a person to realize why this is cringe. This is positive development, and we all have these moments that we look back at and shudder. Well done. I went to high school with a girl who was top of the class, applying to all the Ivies, 4.0 unweighted GPA, APs, stuff like that. She wrote her essay about how she overcame stereotypes by being smart and a cheerleader. I'd say that's pretty pretentious. Somewhat pretentious, or perhaps just plain weird. I had an individual offer me money to write an application essay which was about himself. He really had a brass pair on him, that one. My best friend was salutatorian of her class of 600. She had only applied to one college and it was an Ivy League. She's an upper-middle-class white girl who plays the harp. She wrote her college essay on being a jet-setter. It pains me to say she was completely shocked when she got flat-out rejected. There was that 5-year-old Chinese kid who had a 15-page resume as part of his application to a selective school. It seemed to be just a list of random crap his parents forced him to do, and they're outright lies. I am not an admissions officer. I'm a school ambassador. I give tours for prospective students and families, and our office is where admissions counselors make decisions. We work closely together as I need to be able to answer questions about admissions. I remember a horror story where a student sent an application, had decent scores, a good essay, but almost no extracurriculars. This is a bit of a red flag, as our school has a unique program from which community interaction is really important. About a week after decisions are posted, admissions received an email from the mother of the student described. She proceeded to rip apart the entire admissions team, saying they, and I quote, "are void of any talent or ability to contribute to society. Yet when you're meant to do your horribly mundane, underpaying, and useless job, you can't even do that right." She proceeded to talk about how her daughter was going to be the next president of the United States and how it messed up real bad. This email was met with a response to the tune of, "We're sorry you feel you weren't given a good chance, you can appeal and we'll look again," which is a courtesy that almost all schools will do. The mother replied, and I'm sorry for paraphrasing, "Why would we want to go to your horrendous, vile institution? The grounds of your campus aren't worth the bottom of my daughter's feet." Yada yada yada. Her daughter is apparently the second, third, fourth, and fifth coming of Jesus Christ, all rolled into one, yada yada. And then she got personal, again. She was like, "And by the way, Jenny," that's a different name, but I'm referring to the supervisor of admissions, "I just thought you should know that you're extremely unprofessional on your social media. By the way, Jenny is literally the kindest human being I've met in my entire life, and the worst thing on her social media is like her at a restaurant with her family and an alcoholic beverage on the table." My senior year of high school, we read our college admissions essays for our English class. One student's broad topic was admirable. He wrote about ageism and that it was sad that it stopped people from doing the things they loved. Young people should knit, old people should rollerblade, stuff like that. However, the actual bulk of the essay was him describing how much he loved to play with stuffed turtles. He got into a highly competitive university with that essay, but mostly because his parents worked there. Not pretentious, but I had a Chinese student write in their application, "I hardly ever waste water, paper, or rice." Presumably, he was conflating economics, the degree subject being applied for, with being economical. He also said that he had found a phone and returned it to the owner even though he was Russian. Teachers, when did you realize a parent might be dumber than their kid? I had a parent tell me he cut his daughter's hair in a short bob because they noticed her attitude gets bad when her hair gets too long. Then I had another parent tell me his kid was acting dumb for my benefit and that he's really smart at home. They still refused to get him any tutoring. When talking to a parent regarding behavioral issues, the parent said, "Listen, from 8 till 2, he's your problem, not mine." Taught in an old, impoverished town. Father told me he wouldn't allow his son to read poetry because it would, quote, make him gay. "Every single adult should know where every single child is on campus at all times," the mum said, yelling at me. I'd been giving her son extra help after school along with some other students. We were 6 weeks in and the mum hadn't come to back-to-school night or made any attempt to speak to or contact me. She came to pick up her son and had no idea where to go because she hadn't been to our school before or read the after-school group flyer. Instead, she yelled at some other teachers who were waiting out in front of the school with some of their own after-school students to be picked up. They had no idea who she or her child was. She couldn't ask them where my class was because she didn't know the name of her child's teacher. I walked up with her son as this was happening. She turned and continued to chew me out. She said a lot of ridiculous things that day. It was a complete and blatant projection of irresponsibility. At the end of each year, all the students' merits are tallied up and the top 3 students get a prize. One of the parents was complaining about how it's unfair their child started so low every year, it was a lot harder for them to get to the top. The list starts alphabetized. I was told last year that the obvious reason I work in special education is because I, quote, can't get a job teaching normal children. That's quite enough humanity for me for one day. Oh, god damn it, I still have another 18 minutes to record. Freaking crap. Don't be like this adult, they're really stupid. Case closed, on to the next one. I taught 4th grade next to a military base, so my class was in pencil. Midway through the year, I got a Dutch girl. She didn't speak a word of English. Her dad dropped her off in my room after signing her up, then told me not to make any exceptions for her. She'd learn English on her own. However, she was to be exempt from math because she's never had a math class before. The man was an engineer with the army. I taught her math. She appeared to have very limited exposure to it. By the last semester, though, she was on honor roll, including math. "You know, intellectual property is a real gray area," said a parent in regard to their offspring's blatant plagiarism. I remember my teacher caught a kid in our class who plagiarized an entire essay. As he was reading it, the teacher cut in and started reading something off the computer that was almost word for word what the kid wrote. Every single thing he handed in after that, the teacher checked. I remember him claiming to write a song for this one girl he liked. I didn't know it at the time, but it turned out to be a Beatles song. I was in an IEP meeting. When the counselor asked the student what his post-high school plans were, he proudly stated that he was interested in studying animal science. His mother angrily swung her head at him and said, "Animal science? Oh, hell no. What about our plans for the NFL?" The student got embarrassed and said, "Well, I need a backup plan, Mom." And she said, "Not when you're as great a player as you are." The student was mediocre at best at football. Not as bad as some, but when I was student teaching, a parent emailed saying to give his child a C. No reason, just give her a C. She was getting an F, and I couldn't believe the insanity of just saying what boiled down to C, now. Well, yes, my child is misbehaving, throwing chairs, hitting other kids, but you took his paper airplane in 2nd grade and scrunched it up, so this is really your own doing. I think the best thing to do is for you to help him make a new paper airplane and then just apologize. I'm sure he'll behave. The kid was in 6th grade at this point. Spanish class. The parent asked me to exempt her kid from speaking anything in Spanish. Said it made her daughter uncomfortable to say anything in Spanish. I had an Asian kid that was acing everything. Straight A's. I told his mother that I think he's a little bored. She puffed up and said, "I'll go home and speak to him about that at once." I used to be a preschool teacher, and we did evaluations every few months. One 4-year-old girl, sweet as could be, could only count to the number 4. She struggled with other things, but the counting was by far the worst. Her parents came into the evaluation and were delighted that their daughter could count to 4. We had to gently explain to them that she was well behind the other kids. Even the actually challenged kids surpassed her. She was obviously bright, so we asked them what they worked on with her at home. Nothing. They did nothing with her. They assumed that she didn't or wouldn't start learning till their teachers taught her. To their credit, they did start working with her at home, and by the beginning of the next year, she was ready to move up. I've never been so proud and disappointed at the same time in a set of parents. When I was a swim instructor, this parent was complaining about how her son wasn't improving in swim lessons. It was true that sometimes I had trouble motivating him, but I felt he was doing well. Apparently, she also complained that I wasn't the only one teaching his lessons and that I got several substitutes. That's not true. I taught all of the lessons. So in the next lesson, I thought the kid was doing well again and improving. I even got him to swim short distances without assistance. He was 5 years old and he couldn't touch the bottom, by the way. The mother didn't seem to agree with his progress. She said something like, "He can't just keep going back and forth and kicking the whole time. I mean, you do realize that's how people swim, right, lady?" They sadly didn't come back. My aunt's a teacher, and I remember her telling me about one strange parent encounter about a year ago. She taught the 6th or 7th grade. There was this one kid in her class who was severely underperforming, and even after numerous confrontations with him, he never worked in class or got his grades back up. My aunt had to call his mother down to the school and sit down and just try to talk to her about it. She mentioned that she felt he had the capacity to perform much better, but he just didn't. And the mother just denied it. To be clear, she wasn't crazy or anything, just in absolute denial. My aunt showed his grades, but she ripped the paper apart and told her that it's not true. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about, my son is perfect," and stormed out of the school. Parents like this are the reason why my son's teachers are always so fricking surprised when my wife and I tell them we'll gladly come to the school to punish and reprimand our son if he's acting up. We had a teacher once tell us she was almost stabbed for telling a girl to stop talking in class. The girl's father took this as an attack on his little princess who could do no wrong and showed up at the school with a knife. At parents' evening, "Oh, don't worry about my daughter, she's thick. She only needs to cook and clean. Now how's my little lad doing?" Multiple times over the school year, she emailed me with something like, "My child has been coming home saying she has no homework in your class. I believe she should be having homework from your class every day. Can you please give her some homework?" Okay. 1, there was actually homework. 2, the kid wasn't turning in any homework that quarter. And 3, the zeros were all reflected in the online grade report, which the parent apparently refused to read. Okay, I've reread it and it says she did this multiple times, so she kept forgetting these points? And then continually believed the kid when he said he didn't have any homework for his multiple classes? I mean, that's a problem, for both parties. Parents' evening last year, year 10 or so 14 or 15-year-old kids. I told a woman that her son was doing really well in English and was very bright. She actually scoffed and said, "Really?" The boy was sat there too. I asked what he was thinking of doing when he left school, and he said he wanted to go to college to do A-levels. Kids at this school had ridiculously low aspirations, so this was music to my ears. Then his mother interjected and said, No, you're doing an apprenticeship, you're going to be a plasterer like your dad." Now, I have no problem with kids taking the vocational path as opposed to the academic one, but this kid had a shot, and he wanted to take that shot, but his own mum made him feel that there was no point. So sad. I was a 22-year-old female Asian middle school teacher in a district that was 99% black. You couldn't find any other person who looked quite like me in a 20-mile radius. Had a parent tell me that I couldn't possibly be a good influence on her child. After all, I do skanky things like nails and hair during my off hours. I guess the community's impression of Asian women was that we all worked at nail salons. The extremely skewed Asian stereotypes, however, worked in my favor for classroom management when my kids were convinced that I knew martial arts. Anytime I put on my teacher face when the students were misbehaving, one of the kids would exclaim, "Oh crap, Miss Sung is about to kung fu your butt." I never had too many problems with the kids that year. "It's not your job to teach my son lessons." I kid you not, that's a verbatim quote. My mother is a retired English college teacher. Helicopter parents would regularly call to inquire about their kids' studies. She'd say, "That's confidential as per college policy. If you want to learn your child's grade, you're going to have to ask him or her." "But I'm paying his or her tuition." "It doesn't matter. Your child has a right to privacy. I can only discuss your child's grade with them." "I'm calling the dean." "By all means." Rinse and repeat over and over and over. This parent of a child with behavioral problems sends him to school with crap for breakfast every day. Fast food, Starbucks, cupcakes, you name it. We spent a lot of time trying to get her to even feed the kid breakfast in the first place because he refused to eat what was provided at school and was an absolute nightmare on an empty stomach. We're talking hide under the desk screaming all day levels of difficulty. So we didn't say anything for a while because at least he was on time and eating. Except then all the other students, who previously had no problem with the milk, cereal and fruit they got at school, started noticing the smug kid eating his delicious pancakes or whatever he had that particular day. It became a full-blown kindergarten hunger strike and it was miserable for us. When we asked the mother to please make an effort to feed him prior to arriving at school, she said she didn't have time unless we wanted him to be late every day. That was another problem that took forever to resolve. We reiterated that the school provided a perfectly healthy breakfast for free, and maybe she could make an effort to convince him to eat what everyone else got. He'd do literally whatever she asked. It was just a matter of staying for 10 minutes to eat with him, and she said, "I don't want him eating that sugary processed crap." So he took his McDonald's with an aide in the classroom for the rest of the year. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Kindergarten teacher here. Top questions and statements include, why isn't my child writing their name yet? I don't want my child wearing sunscreen. We live in far north Queensland, Australia. I took my child to the GP. He doesn't need a specialist. My child is free range. I will not vaccinate. My wife is an elementary school teacher and suspected that one of her students might be autistic. The kid wouldn't communicate well at all and had issues with using the bathroom, showed other classic signs of being on the spectrum. My wife had a conference with the mother and explained that she'd like him to be evaluated, but the mother refused and said that if her son did have autism, my wife was the one who caused it. I'm not a teacher, but I coach my kids' youth sports teams. I once had a dad approach me and bribe me $50 to prevent a certain kid from playing in our upcoming flag football game. These were 6-year-old kids. The kid did make a costly mistake in the previous game, but the fact that this random dad was willing to pay me to bench the kid was mind-blowing. I should make it clear that I didn't accept the money. The dad attempted to bribe me and I turned it down for obvious reasons. My mum is frequently forced to let kids retake tests because they didn't do well on them. Not because the kids have any sort of problem, but because the parents whine and complain that their genius somehow got a failing grade on a test, so the school just gives in and lets the kids redo it. Third graders' parents come in with a notarized list of demands. Children in my class must be prohibited from bringing in gluten ever. They said they didn't want her to be left out because other kids were eating gluten. No, she didn't have celiac, it was just the family's personal choice. Then, that I let their daughter choose who she sits next to each day. The class had a carefully coordinated seating plan, by the way. Also, that she be exempt from history class because she was too advanced for our history class but not advanced enough for an AP class. Long story short, they switched her to a private school before year's end. Country, rodeo, this lady was calling her kids over. I was a high school varsity coach. I had a nice girl on my team with very little talent. After not starting, her mum came up to me and said, "It's really sad that Jenny isn't playing. How can you hold it against her?" I asked her what she was talking about, and her response, "Well, her dad's brother dated you in middle school and he broke up with you." Funny thing is, I have no clue who she was talking about. Oh boy, yeah, that's just so perplexing a thing to be blindsided by. If any given failed Tinder date's friends came up and just announced something about one of these people that hadn't worked out, it would be 10 seconds of stupid face from me. No, I don't know their last names and multitude of relatives, so please go away. My daughter's senior class voted a medically handicapped girl prom queen. I feared they were playing a joke on her, but my daughter insisted they all truly wanted her to win. Her family was poor, and the teachers chipped in and bought her a dress and shoes, stuff like that. The summer after graduation, I ran into the mother of another student in the class. This mother had pushed her daughter to be popular, bought her the best of everything, pushed her into being a cheerleader, and even went to the point of trying to set her up with boys in class. She actually chased them on her daughter's behalf. She's also a bit nuts, so I try my best to avoid her if I see her first. This day, I wasn't so lucky. Immediately, she started complaining about the student that was voted prom queen. She kept saying how her daughter should have been prom queen, the other students just voted for the other girl because they didn't want her daughter to get it, which was partially true to be fair. She went on and on about it being so unfair, that she was so mad, and then she started on how horrible it was to vote in a girl that was in special ed's class because she really didn't deserve to graduate. She was so poor that the teachers had to buy her dress, as if it were a sin to be poor. I finally got sick and tired of her crap, and I didn't like her anyway, and told her what I thought. I thought it was a very nice thing for the students to do. This may have been the only special moment that this girl will ever have. This witch's daughter will have many special moments. And it was so nice for the teachers to make sure she was dressed as nice as the other girls. I continued on at length, and this woman was stunned, to say the least. She expected me to agree with her, but I was sick of her and how she was nearly pushing her daughter into any boy who'd date her, and told her daughter's friends about her bedroom life and her crazy tirades every time I saw her. Now, when I run into her, we live in a small town, she doesn't speak and goes on her way. Thank goodness. The family was incredibly well off. The little girl wore Matilda Jane clothing every single day, which is expensive. The individual pieces are between $40 and $60. She almost never wore the same thing twice. Now compare her to a little boy in my class. His dad was in and out of jail. He always wore dirty jeans and the same pair of boots. His mum cut his hair and you could tell. But he was full of personality. All the kids wanted to play with him. He got a little rowdy and did some lightly inappropriate things like, "That's badass," or "What the hell?" But I would never peg him as a behaviorally challenged kid. Well, the rich mother of Matilda Jane girl approached my lead teacher and flat out demanded that her little girl never have contact with this boy because he was a bad influence. She wasn't to sit by him or speak to him or play with him. When we refused, she gave all of these instructions to her daughter, who would approach the little boy and announce over the whole class, "You have to leave here so I can play." People never cease to tee me off. I wasn't a teacher, but I was volunteering while in college to help a school district run a group field day. Me and another friend of mine were asked to sub in for a class-versus-class game of tug-of-war for first graders. One class had 6 less students. Of course, me and my friend hammed it up and acted like we were really struggling. Afterwards, one of the parents from the team we were on just started shouting at us, telling we should be ashamed for not trying our hardest and for faking. Oh yeah, her behavior and aggression vary with the phases of the moon. They said about their child who publicly threatened to kill me over unplugging her phone charger. I teach piano. I used to be a concert pianist. After I was teaching this 7-year-old girl for 2 weeks, the father pulls me aside after the lesson and asks, "So how long until she's as good as you? 6 months?" Had a star athlete who was being recruited by Ivy League schools failing my English class. On top of his generally poor academic performance, I also caught him cheating on a homework assignment, which he vehemently denied. His mum scheduled a meeting with an administrator and proceeded to berate me and to accuse me of discriminating against student athletes. I was the pep club sponsor at the time. Then she said her son would never cheat. I pulled out his homework and proceeded to read one of his answers. As a 16-year-old girl, Mum then begins yelling at him, "You can't even cheat right! What's wrong with you? How are you going to get into college if you can't cheat?" I was a daycare teacher, and this happened during the summer. We had 2 siblings coming in, and in their file it was clearly marked that they were both lactose intolerant. We take every allergy very seriously and do provide snacks to the children, so every box of snacks gets inspected to make sure the kids eating it will be fine. And we also provide alternative snacks just in case. So, this goes on for a week until I notice the kid is drinking milk out of a carton. I go to my supervisor and we ask the kid where she got the milk from. She's so little she doesn't really know, but she thinks she got it from her lunchbox. So now I'm confused. My supervisor is confused as well, and the kid is even more confused since she claims she drinks milk all the time. We get out her form and call the parent, and of course we can't get a hold of her. We agree to monitor the kid until her mum picks her up. She was fine, no tummy ache or anything, so we were carefully optimistic that we'd dodged a bullet there. Well, turns out she isn't lactose intolerant at all. They're not vegan either. Her mum just read somewhere that normal milk makes you smell bad, so she only gives her kids organic milk. It was the end of my shift, so I just left, and laughed my butt off all the way home. Well, at least this is just the funny kind of stupid rather than the permanently stunting my child's chances at life sort of stupid. Just read a little bit more whenever you hear about a newfangled health trend, parents. I was, for several years, a high school teacher here in the UK. At parents' evenings, you'd meet a variety of parents of all faiths and walks of life. For this particular evening, I was sat close to an English teacher friend of mine when the parents of Matt came and sat down. Matt was a pretty singular child. A late transfer, not many friends, horrendous condescending attitude to other students, but also a complainer that no one would work with him, or that no one was good enough when the few that volunteered stepped forwards. So the parents were always likely to be something. Matt's mother sat down and opened with the line, "Once this meeting is done, I'd like to make a formal complaint to your line manager and the head teacher." Usually this would make most teachers blood freeze, but my colleague had been teaching a while and worked to defuse the situation. Well, hopefully it won't come to that, but I'm sorry you're upset. What seems to be the problem? I refuse to have my son be made to read occult texts that encourage devil worship in class. Matt's mother was referring to the Year 7 syllabus text, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which she promptly slammed down as evidence on the table. I see, said my colleague, and proceeded to explain that the national curriculum had done an amount of pre-approval on this, and along with 99% of the country had no problem with it. Matt's mother had come prepared, however. I don't care. He's not reading it. I demand that he be given something of more literary worth. I've checked the national curriculum guidelines, and Matthew will from now on be studying something respectable. I'd like you to separately teach him Macbeth, which is also on the approved reading list. What followed was, I think, only 2 minutes, but it felt like 10 as my colleague slowly and methodically listed all of the occult references in Macbeth, starting with the witches, then ghosts, and then throwing in the numerous murders, I think just for the F of it, to Matthew's mother. To her credit, she sat silently until he was done, at which point she mumbled something about still not wanting Harry Potter and left. I've never seen such a calm takedown of someone's bullcrap opinion before or since. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.